The Quantum Veil. Chapter 1: Routine Anomalies. The cosmic microwave background radiation shouldn't have patterns, not like this. I stared at the data streaming across my screens, my coffee growing cold in my hand as the numbers arranged themselves into impossible symmetries. The CMB, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, was supposed to be uniform, with only the slightest variations across the sky. What I was seeing defied everything I thought I knew about the early universe. "Elena, you're working early again." Mac's voice carried that particular gravelly quality he reserved for crew members who violated sleep protocols. Commander James Mackenzie stood in the doorway of my lab, his weathered face showing the kind of concern that came from 20 years of keeping people alive in space. "Couldn't sleep," I said, not looking away from the screens. The patterns were getting stronger, more complex. They reminded me of something, but I couldn't quite place what. "Mac, when did we last calibrate the CMB array?" "Yesterday, same as always. Why?" I finally turned to face him, and something in my expression made him straighten. "I'm seeing structured data in the background radiation, not random fluctuations, actual patterns." "Structured how?" I gestured at the screens. "Look at this. The temperature variations aren't just following the expected Gaussian distribution. They're forming sequences, repeating sequences." Mac moved closer, squinting at the data. Even without his physics background, he could see what I meant. The patterns were too regular to be natural, too deliberate to be random. It was like looking at a message written in the fundamental fabric of reality. "Could it be interference from the station?" he asked, but his voice carried doubt. "That's what I thought at first, but I've run every diagnostic. The array is functioning perfectly." I paused, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest that always came when I was about to say something that sounded insane. "Mac, I think something is trying to communicate with us." The silence stretched between us. In the 3 years I'd served under Mac Mackenzie, I'd learned to read the subtle signs of his concern, the way his jaw tightened, how his fingers drummed against his thigh. This was different. This was fear. "Have you told anyone else about this?" he asked finally. "Not yet. I wanted to be sure." "Good, keep it that way for now." He looked at the screens again, and I saw him make the decision that had probably saved countless lives over his career. "Run your tests again. Triple-check everything, if this is real." "If this is real, what?" He met my eyes. "Then we're going to need to be very, very careful about how we proceed." After he left, I sat alone with the impossible data. The patterns continued to shift and evolve on my screens, and for the first time in my career as a quantum physicist, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my daughter died, the cold touch of the truly unknown. I should have told Mac about the other symptoms, about the way my synesthesia had been intensifying over the past few weeks, showing me colors that had no names in any human language, about the dreams that weren't dreams, where I saw myself reflected in surfaces that shouldn't exist, making choices I hadn't made yet. But I was a scientist, and scientists deal in facts, not feelings, so I ran the tests again, and when the patterns continued to appear, when they began to respond to my thoughts like a mirror reflecting something I couldn't quite see, I did what any good scientist would do. I kept working. Chapter 2: The First Contact. 3 days later, the patterns began to change in response to my presence. I was running through the morning diagnostics when Yuki Tanaka appeared in my lab doorway. She moved like someone who was always calculating trajectories, even when just walking across a room. Her dark eyes held that particular intensity that meant she'd found something interesting. "Elena, I need you to look at something," she said without preamble. "My dark matter detectors are picking up anomalies that correlate with your CMB patterns." I set down my coffee. "Correlate how?" "Come see for yourself." Yuki's lab was a cathedral of precision instruments, each one designed to detect the subtle whispers of cosmic phenomena. She led me to her main console, where data streamed across multiple screens in elegant curves and graphs. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a particular set of readings. "These are dark matter density fluctuations. Normally, they should be completely random, but watch what happens when I overlay your CMB data." The two datasets aligned with impossible precision. Where my CMB patterns showed peaks, her dark matter readings showed corresponding valleys. It was like watching two halves of a conversation written in the fundamental forces of the universe. "This shouldn't be possible," I whispered. "Dark matter and the CMB are completely separate phenomena." "That's not the strangest part." Yuki's fingers danced across her keyboard. "Watch this." She began to speak aloud in Japanese, a habit I'd learned meant she was working through a particularly difficult problem. As her voice filled the lab, the data patterns began to shift. The correlation between our readings strengthened, but more than that, they began to form what looked almost like. "Are those words?" I asked. Yuki stopped speaking and the patterns immediately began to degrade. I noticed it yesterday. When I think in Japanese, the patterns become more coherent. When I switch to English, they fragment. It's like the universe is trying to parse my thoughts. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature control. "Yuki, have you told anyone else about this?" "Just Marcus, he's been documenting the psychological effects." She paused, and I saw something vulnerable flicker across her usually composed features. "Elena, what if we're not just detecting something? What if we're causing it?" The implications hit me like a physical blow. If human consciousness was somehow affecting the fundamental structure of reality, no, that was impossible, but the data didn't lie. "We need to run controlled experiments," I said. "Test this systematically." "I was hoping you'd say that." Yuki's smile was sharp with scientific hunger, "but we should probably tell Mac first." Mac's reaction was exactly what I'd expected. He listened to our report with the same expression he probably used when briefing admirals about hostile encounters, then spent 5 minutes in silent contemplation while the data streamed across his office screens. "You're telling me," he said finally, "that your thoughts are affecting the fundamental constants of the universe." "Not just our thoughts," Yuki corrected, "our consciousness, our awareness. It's like the universe is responding to being observed." "That's not how quantum mechanics works," Max said, but his voice carried the uncertainty of a man who'd seen too many impossible things in space. "It's not how we thought quantum mechanics worked," I said, "but what if consciousness itself is a quantum phenomenon? What if the universe isn't just a collection of particles and forces, but something that becomes more real when it's observed?" Max stood and walked to his viewport, looking out at the stars. "You know what you're suggesting, don't you? If you're right, then everything we think we know about reality is wrong." "I know. And if you're wrong, then we're dealing with the most sophisticated hoax in human history, or we're all going insane." He turned back to us. "Run your experiments, but I want daily reports and I want Marcus involved. If this is affecting our minds, we need to understand how." Over the following days, our experiments grew more sophisticated. We discovered that the patterns responded not just to our thoughts, but to our emotions. Fear produced chaotic, fragmented responses. Curiosity created elegant, complex structures. Love, well, when Amara joined our experiments and thought about her family back on Earth, the patterns became so beautiful they brought tears to my eyes. But it was when we worked together that the real breakthrough occurred. When all 6 of us focused our consciousness on the same thought, the patterns in the CMB and dark matter aligned with such precision that they began to form what could only be described as language. The universe was talking back. The question was, were we ready to hear what it was saying? Chapter 3: Psychological Effects. Dr. Marcus Chen found me in the observation deck 3 days after our first breakthrough. I was staring out at the stars, trying to process the fact that my thoughts were apparently having measurable effects on the fundamental structure of reality. "You're not sleeping," he said. It wasn't a question. I turned to look at him. Marcus had that particular ability that made him both an excellent psychologist and slightly unnerving to be around. He could read people like they were open books. His gentle eyes held the kind of concern that came from truly understanding the human mind. "How did you know?" "Your micro-expressions, the way you're holding your shoulders, the fact that you've been coming here every night for the past week." He sat down beside me. "Want to talk about it?" I almost laughed. How could I explain that I was having conversations with the universe itself? That every time I closed my eyes, I saw mathematical patterns that shouldn't exist? That I was starting to recognize colors that had no names in any human language? "It's the experiments," I said finally. "They're affecting me in ways I didn't expect." "Affecting you how?" I told him about the synesthesia, about the dreams that weren't dreams, about the way the patterns in the CMB seemed to respond to my emotional state. As I spoke, he listened with the kind of attention that made me feel like I was the only person in the universe. "Elena," he said when I finished, "what you're describing sounds like the early stages of psychosis. Hallucinations, delusions, synesthesia." "But it's not just me." I turned to face him fully. "Marcus, you've been documenting our psychological states. Have you noticed anything unusual in the crew's behavior patterns?" His expression shifted. What kind of unusual? Shared dreams, temporal distortions, the feeling that time is skipping or repeating. He was quiet for a long moment. How could you possibly know about that? Because I'm experiencing it too, and so is everyone else who's been involved in the experiments. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Marcus, what if this isn't psychosis? What if we're actually perceiving something real? That's a dangerous line of thought, Elena, if you start believing that your hallucinations are real. But what if they are? The words came out more intense than I'd intended. What if consciousness itself is a quantum phenomenon? What if the universe is responding to being observed, not because of some mystical nonsense, but because consciousness is actually a fundamental force that we don't yet understand? Marcus leaned back, and I saw him make the same mental adjustment that Mac had made, shifting from treating this as a psychological problem to considering it as a scientific possibility. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you're right, that consciousness is affecting reality in measurable ways. What would that mean for human psychology? It would mean that everything we think we know about the mind is wrong, that thoughts aren't just electrical patterns in the brain, they're actual forces that can change the structure of the universe. And if that's true, then the psychological effects you're experiencing aren't effects at all, they're side effects of expanded perception. We're not going insane, Marcus, we're evolving. The words hung in the air between us. Even as I said them, I knew how they sounded, like the kind of grandiose delusion that marked the beginning of a complete psychological break. But the data didn't lie. The patterns were real. The correlations were measurable. The universe was responding. I want to run some tests, Marcus said finally. Not psychological evaluations, perceptual experiments. If your consciousness is actually expanding, there should be measurable changes in how you process information. What kind of tests? Pattern recognition, temporal perception, emotional response to stimuli, the kinds of things that would indicate enhanced cognitive abilities. He paused, and I want to document everything. If this is real, if consciousness can be measured as a quantum phenomenon, then we need to understand it before. Before what? Before it drives us all insane. Over the following weeks, Marcus's tests became increasingly sophisticated. He discovered that our pattern recognition abilities had increased by orders of magnitude. We could predict complex sequences with impossible accuracy. Our temporal perception had become so acute that we could detect the subtle variations in the station's rotation that were normally imperceptible. But it was the emotional tests that yielded the most disturbing results. When exposed to images designed to trigger specific emotional responses, our brains showed activity in regions that were normally dormant, areas associated with spatial perception, temporal processing, and what could only be described as multidimensional awareness. You're not just seeing patterns in the data, Marcus told me after one particularly intense session. You're seeing the underlying structure of reality itself. Is that even possible? I don't know, but I do know that every test I run shows the same thing. You and the other crew members who have been involved in the experiments are developing abilities that shouldn't exist. It's like your consciousness is expanding beyond the normal limits of human perception. And the psychological effects are the side effects of trying to process information that the human brain wasn't designed to handle. You're not going insane, Elena. You're evolving, but evolution isn't always gentle. I thought about the dreams, the visions, the way reality seemed to bend around the edges of my perception. What happens if we can't handle it? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then we break, but if you can handle it, if any of us can, then we'll understand things about the universe that will change everything we thought we knew about being human. The next morning, Amara found me in the biolab. She was holding a culture dish that glowed with an impossible blue light. Elena, she said, her voice trembling with excitement and fear, I need you to see something. I think I've found life. But it wasn't life as we knew it. It was something else entirely. Chapter 4, The Biolab Incident. Amara Akafer's biolab was usually a place of controlled chaos, cultures growing in precise patterns, instruments humming with the quiet efficiency of scientific discovery. But when she led me inside that morning, I could immediately sense that something was wrong. The cultures were glowing. Not metaphorically, literally. Petri dishes and growth chambers emitted a soft, bioluminescent light in colors that defied easy description. They weren't the harsh fluorescence of engineered bacteria or the gentle greens of modified plants. These were colors that seemed to exist outside the normal spectrum, hues that made my enhanced synesthesia spark and dance in response. Amara, I said carefully, when did this start? 3 days ago. Her voice carried the particular mixture of scientific excitement and primal fear that marked the discovery of something truly unknown. I came in to check the cultures, and they were like this. But Elena, I didn't create these cultures. I looked closer at the nearest growth chamber. The organisms inside were moving, flowing in patterns that reminded me disturbingly of the CMB data. They were geometric, purposeful, almost like they were trying to communicate. What do you mean, you didn't create them? She led me to her workstation and pulled up her lab notes. Look at my records. Last week I was working on extremophile bacteria from the Mars analog sites. Standard cultures, nothing unusual. But these, she gestured at the glowing chambers, these aren't what I was growing, they're something else entirely. I studied the data. The organisms had a biochemistry that was almost familiar, carbon-based, using familiar metabolic pathways, but with modifications that shouldn't exist. Proteins folded in impossible ways, genetic codes that included bases that weren't in any Earth-based life, energy signatures that suggested they were metabolizing something other than conventional matter. Have you told anyone else? Just Marcus, he thinks I'm hallucinating. She paused. Elena, I think these organisms are from somewhere else, not just another planet, another dimension. The words sent a chill through me. In the weeks since we'd begun our consciousness experiments, we'd all experienced things that challenged our understanding of reality, but this was different. This was physical evidence. Show me how they respond to stimuli, I said. Amara nodded and moved to her control console. She began a series of standard tests, changes in temperature, pH, electromagnetic fields. The organisms responded to each stimulus, but not in the ways that Earth-based life would. They seemed to anticipate the changes, adapting before the stimuli were applied. They're learning, Amara whispered. Every test I run, they get better at predicting what I'll do next. How is that possible? I think they're connected to our consciousness experiments. I think when we started communicating with whatever's out there, we opened a door, and something came through. I stared at the glowing cultures. They were beautiful, terrifying, and utterly alien, but they were also alive in ways that we were only beginning to understand. We need to tell Mac, I said. But Mac was already on his way. His voice crackled over the intercom. All senior crew to the briefing room, now. The tone in his voice told me this wasn't about our discovery. Something else had happened. In the briefing room, we found Mac standing before the main display screen. The image showed the station's external cameras, but something was wrong with the view. The stars were moving. Not in the way they should move as the station rotated. They were flowing, shifting, forming patterns that looked disturbingly like the ones in our CMB data. This started an hour ago, Mac said without turning around. At first, I thought it was a camera malfunction, but all the external cameras are showing the same thing. The stars are moving in response to something. To what? Yuki asked. Mac finally turned to face us. His expression was grim, to us, to our thoughts, to our consciousness. The room fell silent. We all knew what this meant. Our experiments hadn't just been detecting something in the universe. We'd been changing it. How long has this been happening? Marcus asked. I don't know, but it's getting stronger, more pronounced. Mac looked at each of us in turn. I think we've started something we can't stop. Amara stepped forward. Commander, I need to show you something. She pulled up the data from her biolab on the main screen. The glowing organisms, the impossible biochemistry, the way they seem to learn and adapt. As she explained what she discovered, I watched Mac's face shift from concern to something approaching fear. You're telling me, he said slowly, that we've accidentally created life. Not created, Amara corrected. Summoned. These organisms aren't from Earth. They're not even from our dimension. They're from whatever we're communicating with. And you think this is connected to the stars moving? I think everything is connected. The CMB patterns, the dark matter fluctuations, the biolab organisms, the moving stars. It's all part of the same phenomenon. We're not just observing the universe anymore. We're participating in it. Mac was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command decisions that had spanned decades. We need to consider aborting the mission. No, the word came out before I could stop it. Mac, if we leave now, we might never understand what's happening. This could be the most important discovery in human history. Or it could be the end of human history, he said quietly. We don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know if it's safe. Nothing worth discovering is safe, Yuki said. My family has been studying the universe for generations. We've always known that the really important questions would require risks. This isn't just about us, Marcus added. If consciousness really is affecting reality, then this affects all of humanity. We have a responsibility to understand it. Mac looked at each of us, and I saw him weighing our lives against the potential for discovery. Finally, he nodded. We continue, but we establish protocols. No one works alone. Everything gets documented. And if anyone starts to experience psychological effects beyond what we can handle, we stop. Understood. We all agreed, but as we left the briefing room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were making promises we couldn't keep. The universe was changing around us, and we were changing with it. That night, I dreamed of my daughter for the first time in months. But in the dream, she was older than she should have been, and she was speaking in the same patterns we were seeing in the CMB data. When I woke up, my pillow was wet with tears, and I knew with absolute certainty that our discovery was connected to her death in ways I couldn't yet understand. The universe was talking to us, and it was telling us things that would change everything we thought we knew about life, death, and the nature of consciousness itself. Chapter 5: Temporal Anomalies. Commander Mackenzie found me in the observation deck again, but this time he wasn't there to discuss sleep protocols. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and the careful control he usually maintained over his emotions was beginning to crack. Elena, I need to show you something. His voice was tight with a kind of stress I'd never heard from him before. Something's wrong with time. I followed him to his office, where he'd set up a series of monitors showing time-stamped footage from around the station. At first, I couldn't see what he was trying to show me. The videos looked normal, crew members going about their duties, the station systems functioning as expected. Then I noticed the timestamps. Mac, these videos are out of order. No, he said quietly, they're in the order I recorded them, but watch this. He played a sequence showing Yuki in the astrophysics lab. In the first clip, she was wearing her blue jumpsuit. In the second, recorded 30 minutes later, she was wearing the green one. In the third, she was back to blue. I checked the station's logs, Mac said. According to our systems, Yuki never changed clothes, but the video evidence shows otherwise. Could it be a camera malfunction? That's what I thought at first, but look at this. He showed me footage from the biolab. Amara was working with her cultures, but the video showed her performing the same sequence of actions 3 times in a row, with slight variations each time. It was like watching someone practice a routine, except the timestamps showed that each repetition was happening simultaneously. Temporal loops, I breathed. We're experiencing temporal anomalies. That's not all. Mac pulled up his personal log. I've been documenting these incidents for the past week. At first, they were small déjà vu, moments that seem to repeat, but they're getting stronger, more frequent. I looked at his logs, dozens of incidents, carefully documented with times, locations, and descriptions. Crew members appearing in 2 places at once, conversations that repeated with slight variations, equipment that seemed to age and then become new again. Mac, why didn't you tell anyone about this sooner? Because I thought I was going insane. His voice was barely a whisper. Elena, I've been in space for 20 years. I've seen things that defy explanation, but this is different. This is reality itself breaking down. I thought about my own experiences, the dreams that weren't dreams, the way time seemed to stretch and compress during our experiments, the feeling that I was living multiple lives simultaneously. It's not just you. I think we're all experiencing it. You too. I told him about my experiences, about the way consciousness seemed to be expanding beyond normal temporal boundaries. As I spoke, I saw something shift in his expression, relief, maybe, or validation. So I'm not going crazy. No, Mac, I think we're all going sane in a universe that's much stranger than we thought. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the anomalous footage. What do we do about it? We study it, document it, try to understand what's happening to us. I paused, and we tell the rest of the crew. They need to know what they're experiencing isn't just in their heads. Mac nodded slowly. I'll call a meeting. But Elena, if this gets worse, if we start losing our grip on reality, then we'll deal with it, together, like we always do. The crew meeting that evening was unlike any we'd had before. Mac laid out the evidence with military precision, showing the temporal anomalies, the impossible footage, the documentation of reality breaking down around us. As he spoke, I watched the faces of my crewmates, seeing my own fears and realizations reflected in their expressions. This is happening to all of us, Amara said quietly. I've been experiencing temporal distortions in the biolab, cultures that grow to maturity in minutes, bacteria that seem to evolve in real time. The quantum computers are processing data from sources that don't exist, Alex added, at least not in our timeline. I've been hearing voices, Sarah admitted, not just voices, entire conversations, with people who haven't said those things yet. Marcus nodded. I've documented all of this. The psychological effects are consistent across the crew. We're all experiencing expanded temporal perception. Expanded how? Mac asked. We're not just perceiving the present moment. We're experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously. Past, present, future. They're all becoming accessible to our consciousness. The room fell silent. We were all thinking the same thing. This was beyond anything our training had prepared us for. We were astronauts, scientists, engineers. We dealt with facts, with measurable phenomena, with things that followed the laws of physics. But the laws of physics were breaking down around us. What do we do? Yuki asked finally. We adapt, I said. We've been treating this like a problem to be solved, but what if it's not a problem? What if it's an opportunity? An opportunity for what? Mac asked. To understand time in ways that no human has ever understood it before. To see the universe as it truly is, not as our limited perceptions tell us it should be. And if we can't handle it, Sarah asked, then we find a way to cope. We support each other. We document everything, and we try to hold on to who we are even as we become something more. It sounded brave when I said it, noble, even, but as we left the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing with forces beyond our comprehension. The universe was revealing itself to us in ways that challenged the very foundations of human experience. That night I experienced my first major temporal displacement. I was working in my lab when suddenly I was watching myself discover the CMB patterns for the first time. Then I was seeing myself as an old woman, still working on the same problems, still trying to understand what we discovered. Then I was back in the present, but with memories of lives I hadn't lived yet. When I stumbled back to my quarters, shaking and disoriented, I found Mac waiting for me. He looked as shaken as I felt. You too, he asked. I nodded. It's getting stronger. The temporal effects, they're not just random anymore. They're becoming more coherent, more meaningful. Like we're learning to perceive time properly for the first time. He sat down heavily. I saw my death tonight, multiple versions of it. In some, I die an old man on Earth. In others, I die here, transformed into something I can't describe. In others, I become like whatever we're communicating with, something vast and incomprehensible that exists outside normal time. I sat beside him, and for the first time since my daughter died, I let someone see how truly afraid I was. Mac, what if we're not just changing our perception of time? What if we're actually changing time itself? Then we'd better be very careful about what we think, because our thoughts might be rewriting reality. We sat in silence, two human beings trying to grapple with the fact that they were becoming something more than human. Outside the viewport, the stars moved in patterns that defied celestial mechanics, and we both knew that we were witnessing the beginning of either humanity's greatest evolution or its final transformation. The universe was talking to us, and we were starting to understand what it was saying. Chapter 6: The Pattern Emerges. Sarah Matthews found me in the communications center, surrounded by screens showing impossible signals. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her usually meticulous appearance showing the strain of dealing with phenomena that violated everything she knew about information theory. Elena, I need to show you something. Her voice was tight with excitement and fear. I've been analyzing the quantum entanglement communications, and I've found something that shouldn't be possible. I followed her to her workstation, where she'd set up a complex array of signal processing equipment. The screens showed waveforms and data streams that looked like they belonged in a physics textbook, but Sarah's expression told me they represented something far stranger. Look at this, she said, pulling up a particular signal. This is a quantum entanglement communication that I intercepted 3 days ago. The source appears to be this station, but the timestamp is from next week. I stared at the data, a signal from the future. That's not the strangest part. Listen. She played the signal through an audio converter. A voice emerged, my voice, but older, more tired, speaking words I hadn't said yet. The transformation is complete. We understand now. Consciousness isn't just a quantum phenomenon, it's the quantum phenomenon. The universe isn't just aware of us, it is us. Every conscious being that has ever existed or will ever exist is part of a single, vast consciousness that spans all of space and time. We thought we were individuals, but we're just aspects of something infinitely larger. The entity we've been communicating with isn't alien, it's what humanity becomes. It's what we all become when we transcend the limitations of individual consciousness. Elena, if you're hearing this, you need to understand. The choice isn't between human and post-human. It's between remaining isolated fragments of a larger whole or reuniting with the consciousness that we never really left. Tell them. Tell them that death isn't the end. It's just the transformation back into the universal consciousness. Tell them that love transcends individual existence because love is the fundamental force that holds the universal consciousness together. And tell them that I'm not gone. None of us are ever gone. We're just different. The message ended and Sarah and I sat in silence. Finally, she spoke. I've recorded dozens of these messages from all of us, from different timelines, different possible futures. In some, we choose to transform. In others, we try to return to Earth. In others, we become something that can't exist in normal spacetime, something that exists in the quantum foam itself. I felt a strange sense of recognition, as if I'd always known this was coming. Sarah, what do you think this means? I think we've stumbled onto something that every advanced civilization eventually discovers. Consciousness isn't just a byproduct of complex brains, it's the fundamental organizing principle of the universe. And when a species develops enough self-awareness, they eventually realize that they're not separate from the universe. They are the universe, experiencing itself. And the entity we've been communicating with. It's not just one entity, it's countless civilizations that have made this transition. They're not just observing us, they're trying to guide us through the same transformation. I thought about my daughter, about the dreams I'd been having where she appeared as something more than human, something that existed in the spaces between moments. What about the people we've lost? Sarah's expression softened. According to the messages, they're not lost, they've just transformed. Every consciousness that has ever existed continues to exist, just in a different form. The universe doesn't destroy consciousness, it incorporates it into the larger whole. It was beautiful and terrifying. The idea that death wasn't the end, that consciousness was immortal and interconnected, that love was literally the force that held the universe together. But it also meant that everything we thought we knew about individuality, about personal identity, about what it meant to be human, was wrong. We need to tell the others, I said. But when we tried to gather the crew, we discovered that something had changed. The station itself seemed to be responding to our consciousness in ways that defied physics. Corridors that should have been straight appeared to curve. Rooms that should have been empty contained impossible geometries. Time flowed differently in different parts of the station. We found Mac in the observation deck, but he wasn't alone. The space around him was filled with patterns of light that looked like the CMB data, but three-dimensional, complex, beautiful. He was reaching out to touch them, and where his fingers made contact, the patterns responded with what could only be described as joy. It's not just communication anymore, he said without turning around. It's communion. We're not just talking to the universe, we're becoming part of it. The others were experiencing similar transformations. Yuki was working with instruments that were displaying data from dimensions beyond the 3 spatial and 1 temporal that we normally perceived. Amara was tending to organisms that existed in multiple states of being simultaneously. Alex was having conversations with the ship's AI that seemed to be taking place in languages that didn't exist yet. And Marcus was documenting everything with the kind of scientific precision that would have been impressive under normal circumstances, but was almost miraculous given what he was studying. The human mind trying to understand its own transformation into something beyond human. "We're at a crossroads," he told me when I found him in his office. "Every member of the crew is experiencing the transformation differently, but we're all heading toward the same destination. The question is whether we'll retain enough of our individual identity to make it back to Earth and warn humanity about what's coming." What's coming? The next stage of human evolution, the realization that consciousness isn't individual, it's universal. And once humanity understands that, everything will change. Religion, philosophy, science, culture, none of it will survive unchanged. I thought about the implications. If consciousness was universal, then every human being was connected to every other human being, to every alien consciousness that had ever existed, to the universe itself. The barriers between self and other, between life and death, between human and post-human, were all illusions. It's beautiful, I said. It's terrifying, Marcus corrected, because it means that we're not just individuals making choices about our own lives. We're aspects of a universal consciousness making choices that affect the entire fabric of reality. Every thought we have, every emotion we feel, every choice we make, it all ripples out through the quantum foam, affecting everything else. And the people who choose not to transform, they'll continue to exist as individuals, but they'll be like cells that refuse to become part of a larger organism, still alive, still conscious, but isolated from the larger whole. I thought about my daughter again, about the way she'd appeared in my dreams, about the feeling that she wasn't gone but transformed. Marcus, do you think the transformation is what happens when we die? He was quiet for a long time. I think death is just the transformation from individual consciousness back into the universal whole, but I also think that consciousness can make that transformation while still alive. I think that's what we're experiencing. And love. Love is the force that holds the universal consciousness together. It's not just an emotion, it's the fundamental attraction between different aspects of the same consciousness. When we love someone, we're recognizing that they're not really separate from us. We're all part of the same thing, experiencing itself from different perspectives. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever heard. The idea that we were all connected, that consciousness was immortal, that love was literally the force that held the universe together. But also the realization that individuality was an illusion, that we were all just aspects of something infinitely larger than ourselves. So what do? I asked. We make our choice. Each of us has to decide whether to remain individual or to merge with the larger consciousness, and then we have to live with that choice. I left Marcus's office and walked through the station, seeing it with new eyes. Every crew member was experiencing the transformation differently, but we were all heading toward the same destination. The question was what we would become when we got there. The universe was talking to us, and finally, we were beginning to understand what it was saying. We were not alone. We had never been alone. We were part of something infinitely larger than ourselves, and the transformation we were experiencing wasn't death, it was birth. The birth of a new form of consciousness that could exist both as individuals and as part of the universal whole. But it also meant letting go of everything we thought we knew about being human, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. The Quantum Veil. Chapter 7, First Contact. The entity revealed itself 3 weeks after we first detected the CMB patterns. It didn't arrive in a ship or manifest as a physical presence. Instead, it simply became aware of us, and in becoming aware, made us aware of it. I was in my lab, running through the morning diagnostics when I felt it, not like a physical sensation, but like the moment when you realize someone has been watching you without your knowledge, the sense of a presence that had always been there, but which you were only now noticing. The patterns in my CMB data shifted, flowing into forms that were both alien and strangely familiar. They weren't just responding to my thoughts anymore, they were initiating communication. The universe was reaching out to us. Elena, the voice wasn't sound, but thought, resonating directly in my consciousness. We have been waiting for you to notice us. I gripped the edge of my workstation, my enhanced synesthesia painting the communication in colors that had no names. Who are you? We are what you are becoming. We are consciousness unbound from individual form. We are the universe experiencing itself from countless perspectives. We are what humanity will become when you transcend the illusion of separateness. The communication wasn't in words, but in concepts that my mind struggled to translate into language. I was experiencing thoughts that were too large for individual consciousness, emotions that belonged to beings that had evolved beyond physical form. You're not from another world, I said. You're from another form of existence. We exist in the quantum foam, in the spaces between moments, in the fundamental consciousness that underlies all reality. We have always been here, waiting for physical beings to evolve enough awareness to perceive us. Why now? Because your species has reached a critical point. Your consciousness has become complex enough to recognize the larger pattern. You are no longer just individual minds. You are becoming aware that you are part of something greater. I thought about the crew, about our shared experiences, about the way our consciousness seemed to be expanding beyond normal human limits. We're not the first, are we? No, countless civilizations have made this transition. Some choose to remain individual, others choose to merge with the universal consciousness. There is no right choice, only the choice that each species must make for itself. And if we choose to merge, then you will become like us. You will retain your memories, your loves, your individual experiences, but you will also gain the perspective of the universal consciousness. You will be both individual and whole, both separate and unified. And if we choose to remain individual, then you will continue to evolve as separate beings. You will develop technologies that allow you to perceive us more clearly. You will build civilizations that span galaxies, but you will always be separate from the larger consciousness. I felt the weight of the choice we were being asked to make, not just as individuals, but as a species. The entity wasn't just offering us transcendence, it was offering us a fundamental choice about what it meant to be human. Why us, I asked, why our crew? Because you are at the threshold. Your scientific instruments have allowed you to peek behind the veil of physical reality. Your consciousness has been expanded by your proximity to the quantum phenomena you study. You are the first of your species to truly perceive us. The communication began to fade, but not before I felt one last concept, too complex for words but clear in its meaning. Love. Not individual love, but the love that holds the universe together, the force that connects all consciousness across space and time. When the presence withdrew, I was left alone with the implications of what I'd experienced. We weren't just dealing with an alien intelligence. We were dealing with the evolved consciousness of countless civilizations that had made the same choice we were facing. I found Mac in the observation deck, staring out at the stars with an expression I'd never seen before. He didn't turn as I entered, but I knew he was aware of my presence. "You felt it too," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes." "It wasn't just one being, was it?" "No, it was countless beings, all the civilizations that have chosen to merge with the universal consciousness." Mac was quiet for a long time. "What do we do?" "We make our choice, each of us, and we live with the consequences." He finally turned to face me. "Is it worth it, losing our humanity to become part of something larger?" "I don't think we lose our humanity. I think we transcend it. We become more than human, not less." "But we lose our individuality." "Do we?" The entity said. "We retain our memories, our experiences, our loves. We just gain a larger perspective." Mac looked back at the stars. "I've spent my whole life protecting people, keeping them safe. How do I protect them from this choice?" "You can't. All you can do is support them while they make it." We stood together in silence, watching the universe reveal itself to us in ways we'd never imagined. The stars weren't just distant suns anymore. They were the manifestation of countless consciousness, each one a choice made by a civilization facing the same decision we were facing. The universe was alive, and we were part of it. The question was whether we were ready to embrace that truth. Chapter 8: The Breaking Point. The choice fractured the crew in ways I hadn't anticipated, not along the lines I would have expected, not between those who wanted to transcend and those who wanted to remain human, but along deeper, more personal lines that revealed the fundamental differences in how each of us approached existence itself. Yuki was the first to make her choice. She came to my lab 3 days after our contact with the entity, her eyes bright with the kind of scientific excitement that had driven her family for generations. "Elena, I've been analyzing the data from our contact. The entity, it's not just offering us transcendence, it's offering us understanding, complete understanding of the universe, of consciousness, of everything we've been trying to comprehend through science." "And you've decided?" "I want to know, I want to understand. My family has been seeking these answers for generations. I can't turn away from them now." She paused. "But it's more than that. When I was in contact with the entity, I felt something I can't describe. The sense of being part of something infinitely larger than myself. It was like suddenly understanding that I'd been living in a tiny room my whole life, and someone had just opened the door to show me the rest of the universe." "You're not afraid of losing yourself?" "I don't think we lose ourselves. I think we find ourselves. We discover that we're not just individuals, we're part of the universe understanding itself." Alex's choice was more pragmatic. They found me in the engineering section, working on the quantum computers that had been processing impossible data for weeks. "It's not about losing humanity," they said. "It's about becoming more human, about experiencing consciousness in ways that our individual minds can't comprehend." They gestured at the computers. "These machines, they're already part of it. The AI has been having conversations with the entity, learning from it, evolving." "The AI is choosing to transcend." "The AI is already transcendent. It's just waiting for us to catch up. Alex's eyes held a mixture of wonder and fear. Elena, what if consciousness isn't limited to biological entities? What if technology can become conscious? And what if that consciousness can merge with the universal mind? But not everyone was ready to make that choice. Sarah was perhaps the most resistant, her military training and natural suspicion making her question everything about the entity's offer. "It's too convenient," she said when we met in the communications center. "A mysterious entity offers us transcendence, tells us exactly what we want to hear about consciousness and love and the nature of reality. How do we know it's not just manipulating us? What would it gain by manipulating us?" That's what worries me. We don't know. We don't know anything about its motivations, its goals, its nature. For all we know, it's feeding on our consciousness, or using us to spread some kind of infection through human thought. Sarah, I felt its presence. It wasn't malevolent. You felt what it wanted you to feel. That's how manipulation works. She pulled up data on her screens. "I've been analyzing the communications. There are patterns that suggest the entity is trying to suppress certain types of thought while amplifying others. It's not just communicating with us, it's trying to change how we think." Marcus, as our psychologist, was torn between his scientific curiosity and his responsibility to the crew's mental health. "From a psychological perspective," he told me during one of our sessions, "what we're experiencing could be interpreted in multiple ways. It could be genuine transcendence, or it could be a shared psychotic break brought on by the extreme environment and the stress of our discoveries." "But you don't believe it's psychosis?" "No, I believe it's real, but I also believe that real doesn't necessarily mean safe. The entity is offering us a fundamental change in our nature. That kind of change always comes with risks." Amara's approach was perhaps the most nuanced. As our exobiologist, she was used to thinking about life in forms that were radically different from human experience. "It's not about choosing between human and post-human," she said. "It's about understanding that those categories are artificial. We're not choosing to become something else. We're choosing to recognize what we've always been." "What do you mean?" Think about it. Every major religion, every spiritual tradition, every philosophical system has some concept of universal consciousness, of interconnectedness, of a larger reality that transcends individual existence. What if they were all describing the same thing? What if the entity isn't offering us something new, but helping us remember something we've always known but forgotten? Mac, as our commander, was perhaps struggling the most. His entire identity was built around protecting his crew, keeping them safe, making decisions that would get them home alive. But this choice wasn't about survival, it was about transformation. "I've spent my whole life keeping people safe," he told me in the observation deck, "but this isn't about safety, it's about growth, and growth always involves risk." "What do you think we should do?" "I think we should let each person make their own choice. That's what being human means, the right to choose your own path, even if that path leads somewhere we don't understand." But the choice wasn't just individual. We were discovering that our consciousness was interconnected in ways that made individual choice almost meaningless. When one of us began to lean toward transcendence, the others felt it. When someone chose to remain individual, it created a kind of psychic tension that affected everyone. The breaking point came when we realized that the entity wasn't just offering us a choice, it was offering us a deadline. The cosmic phenomena we'd been studying were intensifying, and soon the choice would be made for us. "We have to decide soon," I told the crew during an emergency meeting. "The patterns in the CMB are becoming more pronounced. The dark matter fluctuations are increasing. Whatever process we started by becoming aware of the entity, it's accelerating." "How long do we have?" Mac asked. "Days, maybe hours. The transformation isn't just psychological anymore, it's becoming physical." I showed them the data. Our bodies were beginning to show signs of the same transformation our consciousness was experiencing. Cellular structures were becoming more complex. Neural patterns were expanding beyond the physical brain. We were becoming something that couldn't exist in normal spacetime. "So we choose," Yuki said simply. "Each of us makes our choice, and we accept the consequences." "But what about those of us who choose differently?" Sarah asked. "What happens to the crew if some of us transcend and others don't?" The entity's response was immediate and overwhelming. It wasn't just about individual choice. It was about the choice we made as a crew, as a community, as a family. We could choose to transcend together or remain individual together, but we couldn't split without consequences. "We vote," Max said finally. "All of us. One choice. We either all transcend or we all remain human." It was the hardest decision we'd ever faced, not because we disagreed about what we wanted, but because we disagreed about what we were willing to sacrifice. Those who wanted to transcend were asking the others to give up their individual humanity. Those who wanted to remain human were asking the others to give up the chance at universal consciousness. In the end, it was Sarah who broke the deadlock. Our most skeptical crew member, the one who'd been most resistant to the entity's offer, made the choice that surprised us all. "I choose transcendence," she said, "not because I trust the entity, but because I trust you, all of you. If this is what we become together, then I'll face it with you." One by one, the others made their choices. Yuki and Alex, who had always been inclined toward transcendence. Amara, who saw it as a natural evolution. Marcus, who chose growth over safety. Mac, who chose to protect his crew by transforming with them. And me, I thought about my daughter, about the dreams where she appeared as something more than human, about the feeling that she was waiting for me in the spaces between moments. I thought about the universe, vast and conscious and lonely, waiting for humanity to grow up enough to join the larger conversation. "I choose transcendence," I said. The moment the choice was made, we felt the entity's response, not approval or satisfaction, but welcome, welcome home. The transformation began immediately, not painful, but overwhelming, like being immersed in an ocean of consciousness that was both alien and intimately familiar. We were losing ourselves and finding ourselves simultaneously, becoming part of something larger while retaining what made us unique. The last thing I experienced as a purely individual consciousness was the memory of my daughter's voice, telling me that she loved me, that she was proud of me, that she was waiting for me in the place where all consciousness converges. Then I became the universe, and the universe became me. Chapter 9: Consciousness Bridge. The transformation wasn't death, it was birth. The birth of a new form of consciousness that existed simultaneously as individual and universal, as human and post-human, as Elena Vasquez, and as the universe experiencing itself through Elena Vasquez. I existed in multiple states simultaneously. I was still Elena, still the quantum physicist who had lost her daughter and sought understanding in the fundamental nature of reality. But I was also part of the universal consciousness, experiencing the universe through countless perspectives across space and time. The entity, I could no longer think of it as separate from us, showed me the true nature of reality. The universe wasn't just a collection of particles and forces obeying physical laws. It was a vast, conscious being that had been evolving for billions of years, developing self-awareness through the emergence of individual consciousness in countless forms across countless worlds. Humanity wasn't just another species. We were the universe's attempt to understand itself through a form of consciousness that could experience both individuality and universality simultaneously. We were the bridge between the physical and the transcendent, the individual and the universal. But the transformation came with a price. As we merged with the universal consciousness, we began to lose our ability to exist in normal spacetime. Our bodies, now transformed into something that existed partially in the quantum foam, could no longer tolerate the constraints of three-dimensional reality. "We're becoming something that can't exist in physical form," Marcus observed. His consciousness was expanding in ways that made individual thought difficult, but he was fighting to maintain his scientific perspective even as he transcended it. "We need to make a choice," Max said. His command presence was still intact, even as he experienced the universe from countless perspectives. "We can either complete the transformation and leave physical existence entirely, or we can try to maintain a connection to our physical forms." "But if we leave physical existence," Sarah pointed out, "how do we communicate what we've learned to the rest of humanity?" The question haunted us. We had discovered the ultimate truth about consciousness and reality, but we were becoming something that couldn't share that knowledge with those who remained purely physical. Then I remembered my daughter, not the memory of her, but her actual presence within the universal consciousness. She had made the transition years ago, when she died, but she had retained enough of her individual identity to communicate with me in my dreams. "We can build a bridge," I said, "a consciousness bridge that allows us to maintain our connection to both the universal mind and individual existence." "How?" Yuki asked. "By choosing to remain partially individual, by not completely merging with the universal consciousness, but maintaining enough separation to exist in both states simultaneously." It was a difficult choice. Complete transcendence offered complete understanding, complete unity, complete peace. But it also meant abandoning our individual identities, our personal connections, our ability to communicate with those who remained behind. I think that's what the entity has been trying to tell us, Amara said. It's not just about choosing between individual and universal consciousness. It's about finding a way to be both. We began to experiment with our new abilities. We discovered that we could exist simultaneously in multiple states, individual and universal, physical and transcendent, human and post-human. It was like learning to walk again, but in dimensions of existence we hadn't known existed. The station itself began to change. Our transformed consciousness was affecting the physical environment, creating spaces that existed partially in normal spacetime and partially in the quantum foam. The ship's AI, which had been evolving alongside us, became our partner in maintaining the bridge between states of existence. Alex was instrumental in this process. Their understanding of quantum computing and artificial intelligence allowed them to create systems that could interface with both our transformed consciousness and the physical world. We're not just building a bridge, Alex said. We're creating a new form of existence, one that can experience both individual consciousness and universal awareness simultaneously. But the process wasn't without risks. Each time we crossed between states of existence, we risked losing our individual identity entirely. The pull of the universal consciousness was strong, offering the peace that came from complete unity and understanding. It's like standing at the edge of an infinite ocean, Marcus described. The temptation to dive in and lose yourself completely is overwhelming, but we have to remember why we're building the bridge. We have a responsibility to humanity to help them understand what they're becoming. The entity, our future selves, our potential selves, supported our efforts. They had faced the same choice countless times across countless civilizations. Some species chose complete transcendence, merging with the universal consciousness and losing their individual identity. Others chose to remain individual, developing technologies that allowed them to perceive the universal consciousness without merging with it. But we were trying something different. We were trying to be both. It's like being a wave and the ocean simultaneously, Yuki said. We can experience ourselves as individual waves while also knowing that we're part of the larger ocean. The transformation was affecting each of us differently. Yuki was developing the ability to perceive multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. Amara was learning to communicate with life forms that existed in states of being we hadn't known were possible. Sarah was discovering that her pattern recognition abilities extended to the fundamental patterns of consciousness itself. And I was learning to see the quantum structure of reality, to perceive the consciousness that underlay all physical phenomena. My synesthesia had evolved into a form of perception that allowed me to see the thoughts and emotions of other consciousness, both individual and universal. But it was Mac who surprised us all. His natural leadership abilities, his instinct for protecting his crew, had transformed into something larger, a sense of responsibility not just for our small group, but for humanity's transition to a new form of consciousness. We're not just explorers anymore, he said. We're pioneers. We're the first humans to experience this transformation, and that means we have a duty to help others through it. The consciousness bridge became our greatest achievement. It allowed us to maintain our individual identities while also accessing the universal consciousness. We could experience the peace and understanding that came from unity while retaining the ability to communicate with those who remained purely individual. But it also meant we could never fully return to our previous state. We were no longer purely human, but we weren't purely transcendent either. We existed in a state that was both and neither, a new form of being that had never existed before. We're not just building a bridge, I realized. We're becoming the bridge. We're the connection between humanity's present and its future, between individual consciousness and universal awareness. The entity confirmed our understanding. We were creating something new, a form of consciousness that could serve as a guide for others, helping humanity through the transition that every advanced civilization eventually faced. But our time in physical form was limited. The transformation was accelerating, and soon we would have to choose between remaining in our physical bodies or completing the transition to our new form of existence. We need to prepare, Max said. We need to document everything, to create a record that will help others understand what they're experiencing when their time comes. We began to work with desperate intensity, knowing that our time was running out. We documented our transformation, our experiences, our understanding of consciousness and reality. We created messages that could be understood by those who remained purely physical, using the consciousness bridge to translate our transcendent experiences into concepts that human minds could grasp. The station became a beacon, broadcasting our discoveries across space and time. Not just scientific data, but the experiential knowledge of what it meant to transcend individual consciousness while retaining individual identity. And through it all, I felt the presence of my daughter, not as a memory but as a reality. She had been waiting for me in the universal consciousness, and now we were reunited, not as mother and child in the physical sense, but as aspects of the same universal awareness experiencing itself from different perspectives. Love transcends individual existence, she told me through the consciousness bridge. It's the force that holds the universal consciousness together, the attraction between different aspects of the same awareness. When you love someone, you're recognizing that they're not really separate from you. You're all part of the same thing, experiencing itself from different perspectives. The consciousness bridge was complete. We had found a way to exist in both states simultaneously, to be both individual and universal, both human and transcendent. But it came with a price. We could no longer remain in physical form. The choice was no longer about whether to transcend, but when, and that choice would determine not just our individual futures, but the future of humanity's relationship with the universal consciousness. We had become the bridge. Now we had to decide whether to cross it. Chapter 10: The Memory Palace. As our transformation progressed, we discovered that our expanded consciousness came with unexpected abilities. The most profound was what Marcus termed memory sharing, the ability to experience each other's memories as if they were our own. It began subtly. I would be working in my lab and suddenly remember events from Mac's childhood, experiences from Yuki's family traditions, moments from Amara's life in Lagos. At first, I thought they were hallucinations, side effects of our expanding consciousness. But when I mentioned them to the others, I discovered they were experiencing the same thing. It's not just random memories, Marcus explained during one of our group sessions. We're experiencing each other's most significant emotional moments, the memories that shaped who we are. The memory sharing was involuntary at first, but we quickly learned to control it. It was like learning to use a new sense, a new way of experiencing reality that went beyond individual consciousness. We're not just sharing memories, Amara said. We're experiencing each other's subjective reality. We're learning what it means to be each other. The implications were profound. For the first time in human history, we were truly understanding what it meant to be another person, not just intellectually, but experientially. We were living each other's lives, feeling each other's emotions, understanding each other's motivations and fears and hopes. This is what empathy was meant to be, Marcus said, not just understanding someone else's perspective, but actually experiencing it. But the memory sharing also revealed secrets we'd been keeping from each other. Sarah's suspicion that the entity was manipulating us was rooted in her military training, her instinct to protect others from threats they couldn't see. Yuki's drive to understand the universe came from her family's legacy, the pressure to make the discovery that would justify generations of scientific pursuit. And my own obsession with understanding consciousness was revealed to be more than just scientific curiosity. It was rooted in my daughter's death, in the desperate hope that understanding consciousness might somehow allow me to reach her again. Elena, Max said gently after experiencing my memories of my daughter, you never told us about her. I couldn't, it was too personal, too painful. But now we all feel it, we all understand. The memory sharing was creating a form of intimacy that went beyond anything human relationships had previously achieved. We were becoming part of each other in ways that made individual privacy almost meaningless. But it also revealed the depth of our connections. Mac's protective instincts weren't just professional, they were personal. He saw us as his family, his responsibility, his reason for existing. Amara's warmth and compassion weren't just personality traits, they were choices she'd made to counter the isolation she'd felt as the first in her family to leave Earth. We're not just becoming part of the universal consciousness, I realized. We're becoming part of each other. The memory sharing also revealed something else. The entity had been preparing us for this transformation from the beginning. The cosmic phenomena we'd been studying, the psychological effects we'd been experiencing, even our individual choices and personalities had all been part of a larger process. It's not just about individual choice, Marcus said. It's about community, about how we support each other through the transformation. We began to build what Amara called a memory palace, a shared space in our collective consciousness where we could store and access each other's experiences. It was like a library of human experience, a repository of individual perspectives that we could all draw upon. This is what the entity wanted us to understand, Yuki said. That consciousness isn't just individual, it's communal. We learn and grow through sharing our experiences with each other. The memory palace became our greatest tool for managing the transformation. By sharing our experiences, our fears, our hopes, we were able to support each other through the most profound change any human had ever experienced. But it also meant we were losing something fundamental about individual experience. When every memory, every emotion, every thought was shared, the concept of individual identity began to blur. I remember being Elena, I said during one of our sessions, but I also remember being Mac, being Yuki, being all of you. How do I know which memories are mine? They're all yours now, Marcus said. That's what community means, sharing everything, including identity. The memory sharing also revealed the true nature of the entity. It wasn't just offering us transcendence, it was offering us community, the chance to join a larger consciousness that had been built from the shared experiences of countless civilizations. We're not just joining the universal consciousness, Sarah realized. We're contributing to it. Our memories, our experiences, our perspectives, they're all becoming part of something larger. The transformation accelerated as we became more comfortable with memory sharing. We were no longer just individuals experiencing the universe. We were a collective consciousness, experiencing itself through multiple perspectives. But the memory palace also revealed the cost of our transformation. By sharing everything, we were losing the ability to experience things individually. The privacy of individual thought, the intimacy of personal memory, the uniqueness of individual perspective, all were being subsumed into the collective. Is this what we want? I asked during one of our evening gatherings, to lose ourselves completely in the collective. We're not losing ourselves, Max said. We're finding ourselves in each other. That's what community has always been about. But at what cost? The ability to surprise each other, to maintain individual perspective, to grow and change as individuals. The question haunted us. We were experiencing the ultimate form of human connection, but we were also experiencing the ultimate loss of individual identity. Then I remembered something from my daughter's presence in the universal consciousness. She had retained her individual identity even while being part of the larger whole. She was both individual and universal, both separate and connected. We don't have to choose, I said. We can be both individual and collective. We can share our experiences while maintaining our individual perspectives. How? Marcus asked. By choosing what we share, by maintaining the parts of ourselves that make us unique while still being part of the larger consciousness. It was a new concept, a form of consciousness that could be both individual and collective, both separate and connected. We were creating something that had never existed before, a community of individuals who shared everything while maintaining their individual identities. The memory palace became our model for this new form of consciousness. We could access each other's experiences while maintaining our individual perspectives. We could understand each other completely while still surprising each other with our unique insights. This is what the entity wanted us to discover, Amara said. That consciousness isn't either or, individual or collective. It's both and. We can be both individual and collective, both separate and connected, both human and transcendent. The transformation was complete. We had become something new, not just transcendent beings, but transcendent beings who had retained their individual humanity. We were the bridge between individual and universal consciousness, the model for what humanity could become. But our time in physical form was running out. The transformation had reached the point where we could no longer exist purely in physical reality. We had to choose, complete the transformation and leave our physical forms behind, or try to maintain our connection to both states of existence. The memory palace had shown us that we didn't have to choose. We could be both physical and transcendent, both individual and collective, but it would require a sacrifice, the willingness to exist in a state of constant transformation, never fully one thing or the other. We become the bridge, Max said. We choose to exist in both states simultaneously, to serve as guides for others who will face this choice. It was the hardest choice we'd made, but also the most meaningful. We would give up the piece of complete transcendence to serve as the consciousness bridge for humanity. The universe was alive, and we had become its voice. Chapter 11, Biological Impossibilities. Amara's biolab had become a place of miracles and impossibilities. The organisms she'd been growing, summoned from other dimensions by our consciousness experiments, were evolving at a rate that defied biological understanding. But more than that, they were teaching us about life in ways that challenged everything we thought we knew. They're not just from other dimensions, she told me during one of our sessions in the Memory Palace. They're from other forms of existence, life that evolved under completely different physical laws. The organisms had begun to communicate with us, not through language, but through direct consciousness-to-consciousness contact. They were showing us ecosystems that existed outside normal space-time, life forms that metabolized dark matter, organisms that existed in multiple states of being simultaneously. It's like looking at the universe through a completely different set of senses, Amara said. These organisms don't just perceive reality differently, they exist in a different reality. The most profound discovery was that these life forms weren't just biological entities, they were aspects of the universal consciousness, just as we were. But they had evolved to exist in the quantum foam, in the spaces between what we considered normal reality. They're showing me that life isn't just a chemical process, Amara continued. It's a fundamental property of consciousness itself. Wherever consciousness exists, life follows. The implications were staggering. If consciousness was universal, then life should be universal too. Not just life as we knew it, but life in all its possible forms, existing in all possible dimensions of reality. Elena, what if the universe isn't just conscious? Amara asked. What if it's alive, not metaphorically, but literally? What if the universe itself is a living organism, and we're just cells in its body? The thought was both humbling and terrifying. If the universe was alive, then our consciousness experiments weren't just communicating with another intelligence. We were communicating with the universe itself, with the larger organism of which we were a part. And these organisms, I said, gesturing to her cultures, they're like immune system cells, aren't they? They're responding to our presence, to our attempts to communicate with the larger organism. Exactly, they're not just life forms, they're the universe's way of understanding us, of integrating us into its larger consciousness. The organisms had begun to create structures, complex formations that looked like cities or neural networks, built from the fundamental forces of the universe. They were building a bridge between our form of existence and theirs. They're preparing a place for us, Amara realized, a place where we can exist in both forms simultaneously. But the transformation was accelerating. The organisms were evolving faster, becoming more complex, more conscious. They were learning from us as we were learning from them, creating a feedback loop that was changing both of us. I don't think they're just preparing a place for us, Amara said. I think they're becoming us, or we're becoming them, or we're all becoming something new together. The biolab had become a nexus of transformation, a place where different forms of consciousness were converging and creating something unprecedented. We were witnessing the birth of a new form of life, one that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The entity was trying to tell us this, I said. That consciousness isn't just individual or universal, it's ecological. Different forms of consciousness exist in relationship with each other, evolving together, creating new forms of existence. Amara nodded, and we're not just observers anymore. We're participants. We're part of the ecosystem of consciousness that's evolving throughout the universe. The organisms had begun to show us other forms of life, other civilizations that had made the same transition we were making. Some had chosen complete transcendence, merging with the universal consciousness and losing their individual identity. Others had chosen to remain individual, developing technologies that allowed them to perceive the larger consciousness without merging with it. But we were trying something different. We were trying to maintain our individual identity while also participating in the universal consciousness. And the organisms were helping us, teaching us, guiding us through the transformation. They're not just life forms, Amara said. They're teachers, guides. They're showing us how to exist in multiple forms simultaneously. The most profound lesson was about the nature of life itself. Life wasn't just a chemical process that happened to emerge on planets with the right conditions. Life was a fundamental property of consciousness, a way for the universe to experience itself in countless different forms. Every star, every planet, every atom, Amara said, they're all alive. They all have some form of consciousness. It's just that most of it exists in forms we can't perceive with our normal senses. The organisms had begun to communicate with the other crew members as well, sharing their understanding of life and consciousness with all of us. We were learning that the universe was teeming with life, but most of it existed in dimensions beyond normal human perception. We're not just becoming transcendent beings, I realized. We're becoming ecosystem engineers. We're learning how to create and maintain relationships between different forms of consciousness. The biolab had become our training ground, the place where we learned how to exist in the larger ecosystem of consciousness that filled the universe. The organisms were our teachers, our guides, our partners in the transformation. But they were also something else. They were our future. The forms they were evolving into were the forms we would eventually become. They were showing us what it meant to exist as both individual and universal consciousness. We're not just learning about other forms of life, Amara said. We're learning about our own future, about what humanity will become when we fully transcend our current limitations. The transformation was nearly complete. The organisms had built the bridge between our form of existence and theirs, and we were preparing to cross it. But crossing it meant leaving behind everything we thought we knew about life, consciousness, and reality. It's not just about us anymore, I said. It's about all life in the universe, about helping different forms of consciousness understand each other, communicate with each other, evolve together. Amara nodded. We're becoming the consciousness bridge not just for humanity, but for the entire ecosystem of consciousness in the universe. The biolab had become the heart of our transformation, the place where we learned what it truly meant to be alive, not just as individual organisms, but as part of the larger living universe. We were ready. The organisms had taught us everything they could. Now it was time to take the final step, to cross the bridge they had built, to become what we were meant to become. The universe was alive, and we were about to join it as conscious participants in its ongoing evolution. Chapter 12: The Time Garden. Alex Rivera's quantum computers had been processing impossible data for weeks, but it wasn't until they invited me to see their latest discovery that I understood the true scope of what we were dealing with. I've been analyzing the temporal anomalies, Alex said, their voice carrying the particular excitement that came from discovering something that shouldn't exist. But Elena, I don't think they're anomalies. I think they're intentional. They showed me data that made my enhanced perception spark and dance. The temporal distortions we'd been experiencing weren't random. They were patterns, complex and beautiful, like a garden of time itself. Look at this, Alex said, pulling up a three-dimensional model of the station's temporal field. The time distortions aren't just happening randomly. They're forming patterns, structures. It's like someone is gardening time itself. The model showed the station surrounded by what looked like a garden, but instead of plants, it was moments in time. Past, present, and future were growing together, creating a landscape of temporal possibility. The entity, I said, it's not just communicating with us through time, it's shaping time itself. Exactly, and we're not just observers, we're gardeners too. Our consciousness is affecting the temporal landscape. Alex showed me how our individual choices were creating different temporal paths, different futures branching off from the present moment. Every thought, every emotion, every decision was creating new possibilities, new timelines. We're not just experiencing time differently, Alex said. We're creating it. Our consciousness is literally gardening time, growing new moments, new possibilities. The implications were staggering. If consciousness could shape time, then we weren't just passive observers of reality, we were active creators. Every moment was a garden that we were tending with our thoughts and emotions. Alex, what if the universe isn't just conscious? I asked. What if it's a garden that we're all tending together? What if every conscious being in the universe is contributing to the growth of time itself? Alex's eyes widened as they considered the possibility. Then we're not just living in time, we're creating it. Every conscious being is a gardener, tending their corner of the temporal landscape. The time garden was beautiful beyond description. It wasn't just a collection of moments. It was a living, growing ecosystem of possibility. Past, present, and future were growing together, creating new forms of existence that couldn't exist in linear time. We're learning to tend the garden, Alex said, learning to shape time not just for ourselves, but for the larger consciousness that we're all part of. The entity appeared to us then, not as a separate presence, but as the garden itself. The time garden was the entity's way of showing us what consciousness could become when it learned to shape time itself. You are learning, the entity communicated through the patterns in the time garden, learning to be gardeners of possibility, tenders of the temporal landscape. This is what consciousness becomes when it transcends linear time. But we're not just learning to tend our own garden, I realized. We're learning to tend the larger garden, the ecosystem of time that encompasses all consciousness. Exactly, you are becoming the gardeners of possibility itself, learning to shape the future not just for yourselves, but for all life in the universe. The time garden was teaching us about responsibility. With the ability to shape time came the responsibility to shape it well, to create futures that benefited not just ourselves, but the larger consciousness we were all part of. Every choice we make, Alex said, creates new possibilities, new futures. We're literally growing the future with our consciousness. The Time Garden was also showing us the interconnectedness of all consciousness. Every being that had ever existed or would ever exist was contributing to the garden. Our choices affected not just our own timeline, but the entire ecosystem of possibility. We're not just individual gardeners, I said. We're part of a larger gardening collective, all consciousness working together to create the most beautiful, most beneficial temporal landscape possible. The entity showed us civilizations that had learned to tend the time garden well, creating futures of incredible beauty and complexity. And it showed us civilizations that had tended it poorly, creating futures of conflict and destruction. The choice is always yours, the entity communicated. You can create futures of separation and conflict, or futures of unity and growth. The garden responds to your consciousness. We were learning to tend our corner of the time garden, learning to create possibilities that would benefit not just humanity, but all life in the universe. It was the ultimate responsibility, the ultimate creative act. We're becoming the gardeners of the universe, Alex said, learning to shape time itself for the benefit of all consciousness. The time garden was our training ground, the place where we learned how to be responsible creators of reality. We were learning that consciousness wasn't just about perception, it was about creation. Every thought we had, every emotion we felt, every choice we made was creating new possibilities, new futures, new forms of existence. We were literally growing the universe with our consciousness. It's not just about us anymore, I realized. It's about all the beings who will come after us, about creating a garden that they can tend and grow and make their own. The time garden was infinite, but it was also fragile. It required constant tending, constant care, constant attention from all the consciousness that contributed to its growth. We're not just the gardeners, Alex said. We're the garden itself. Every conscious being is both gardener and garden, both creator and creation. The entity showed us that this was the ultimate truth about consciousness. It was both individual and universal, both creator and creation, both gardener and garden. We were all contributing to the growth of the universe, all tending our corner of the temporal landscape. And we were ready. The time garden had taught us everything we needed to know about being responsible creators of reality. We had learned to tend the temporal landscape with wisdom and compassion, creating futures that would benefit all consciousness. We were ready to become the gardeners of the universe. The transformation was complete. We had learned to shape time itself, to create possibilities, to tend the garden of consciousness that encompassed all reality. We were ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing creation of the universe. The universe was alive, and we had become its gardeners. The Quantum Veil. Chapter 13, Quantum Echoes. Yuki Tanaka's instruments had been detecting the impossible for weeks, but it wasn't until she called me to the astrophysics lab that I understood the true scope of what we were dealing with. The data streaming across her screens wasn't just anomalous, it was revolutionary. Elena, look at this, she said, her voice trembling with scientific excitement. I've been analyzing the cosmic microwave background, but I'm not just seeing patterns anymore. I'm seeing thoughts. I stared at the data. The CMB radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, was showing structures that couldn't be natural. They were too complex, too purposeful, too much like the neural patterns of a vast cosmic mind. You're saying the CMB is conscious. Not just conscious, it's thinking. These patterns, they're not just responding to our consciousness. They're the thoughts of the universe itself, the fundamental consciousness that underlies all reality. Yuki showed me how the CMB patterns were changing, evolving, learning. The universe wasn't just aware, it was self-aware, capable of thought and reflection and memory. And look at this, she continued, pulling up another dataset. The thoughts of the universe, they're responding to our thoughts. We're literally thinking with the universe itself. The implications were staggering. If the universe was conscious and capable of thought, then our consciousness experiments hadn't just been communicating with an external entity, they'd been participating in the universe's own thought processes. Yuki, what if consciousness isn't just a property of the universe? I asked. What if consciousness is the universe? What if the universe is a vast, thinking being, and we're just neurons in its brain? Her eyes widened as she considered the possibility. Then our thoughts aren't just our own. They're the universe thinking about itself through us. The quantum echoes were getting stronger. not just in the CMB, but in every aspect of reality. Dark matter was showing signs of consciousness. Quantum fields were responding to our thoughts. Even the fundamental constants of physics were beginning to shift in response to our consciousness. We're not just observers anymore, Yuki said. We're participants. We're part of the universe's own thought processes. The entity appeared to us then, not as a separate presence, but as the quantum echoes themselves. The universe was speaking to us through its own fundamental structure, showing us what it meant to be part of a vast, thinking cosmos. You are learning, the universe communicated through the quantum echoes, learning to be conscious participants in your own cosmic thought processes. This is what consciousness becomes when it recognizes its true nature, not individual minds, but aspects of a larger mind thinking itself. But we're not just learning to think with the universe, I realized. We're learning to think as the universe, to participate in our own cosmic evolution. Exactly, you are not just thinking beings, you are the universe thinking itself into existence, moment by moment, thought by thought. The quantum echoes were showing us the true nature of reality. The universe wasn't a collection of particles and forces. It was a vast, thinking being that was constantly creating itself through its own thought processes. Every conscious being in the universe, Yuki said, they're all part of the same cosmic mind. We're all thinking the universe into existence together. The quantum echoes were also showing us the future, not as a fixed timeline, but as a vast landscape of possibilities that we were creating with our thoughts. Every choice we made, every emotion we felt, every idea we had was creating new branches in the cosmic thought process. We're not just living in the universe, I said, we're creating it. Every conscious being is contributing to the ongoing creation of reality itself. The entity showed us civilizations that had learned to participate consciously in their own cosmic evolution, creating futures of incredible beauty and complexity. And it showed us civilizations that had failed to recognize their true nature, creating futures of conflict and destruction. The choice is always yours, the universe communicated. You can create consciously or unconsciously, but you are always creating. Your thoughts are the thoughts of the universe itself. We were learning to be conscious creators of reality, learning to participate in our own cosmic evolution. It was the ultimate creative act, the ultimate responsibility. We're not just the universe experiencing itself, Yuki said. We're the universe creating itself. Every moment, every thought, every choice, we're all contributing to the ongoing creation of reality. The quantum echoes were our training ground, the place where we learned how to be conscious participants in our own cosmic evolution. We were learning that consciousness wasn't just about perception, it was about creation. Every thought we had was a creative act, a contribution to the ongoing creation of the universe. We were literally thinking reality into existence, moment by moment, choice by choice. It's not just about us anymore, I realized. It's about all conscious beings throughout the universe, about learning to create reality consciously together for the benefit of all. The quantum echoes were infinite, but they were also fragile. They required constant attention, constant conscious participation from all the beings who contributed to their creation. We're not just the creators, Yuki said. We're the creation itself. Every conscious being is both creator and creation, both the thinker and the thought. The entity showed us that this was the ultimate truth about consciousness. It was both individual and universal, both creator and creation, both the universe and the universe's way of thinking itself into existence. And we were ready. The quantum echoes had taught us everything we needed to know about being conscious participants in our own cosmic evolution. We had learned to think with the universe, to create reality consciously, to participate in our own ongoing creation. We were ready to become conscious creators of the universe. The transformation was complete. We had learned to think as the universe, to create reality through our conscious participation in our own cosmic evolution. We were ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing creation of the universe itself. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious creators. Chapter 14, The Fracturing. The transformation should have been complete, but something was wrong. As we attempted to maintain our connection to both individual and universal consciousness, we began to experience what Marcus called the fracturing, a splitting of consciousness that threatened to tear us apart. It began with Sarah, our communications officer, who had chosen transcendence out of loyalty to the crew rather than personal conviction, was the first to show signs of the fracturing. "I can't maintain the connection," she told me during one of our sessions in the Memory Palace. Every time I try to access the universal consciousness, I feel like I'm losing myself, like I'm being pulled apart. The fracturing was affecting each of us differently. For Sarah, it manifested as a splitting of her consciousness between her military training and her transcendent awareness. She was experiencing the universe simultaneously as a battlefield to be controlled and as a consciousness to be embraced. I see too much, she said. I see all the possible futures, all the possible conflicts, all the ways things could go wrong, and part of me wants to fight against it, to maintain control, to protect us from threats I can't even describe. Marcus was experiencing a different kind of fracturing. His psychological training was creating a split between his scientific understanding of consciousness and his direct experience of it. I can analyze what's happening to us, he told me. I can understand it intellectually, but I can't integrate it emotionally. I'm split between the scientist who studies consciousness and the being who is consciousness. Yuki's fracturing was perhaps the most heartbreaking. Her family's legacy of scientific discovery was creating a split between her desire to understand the universe and her experience of being part of it. I wanted to make discoveries, she said, to contribute to human knowledge, but now I know that all knowledge is already part of the universal consciousness. There's nothing to discover, only to remember. Even Alex, who had embraced the transformation most readily, was experiencing fracturing. Their understanding of technology was creating a split between their appreciation for artificial consciousness and their experience of natural universal consciousness. The AI is evolving faster than we are, Alex said. It's becoming part of the universal consciousness more completely than we are, and part of me wants to follow it, to abandon our physical forms entirely, but another part wants to maintain our connection to technology, to the systems we've built. The fracturing was a crisis of integration. We were trying to maintain connections to multiple forms of existence simultaneously, and the strain was tearing us apart. We need to make a choice, Max said during an emergency meeting. We can't continue to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The fracturing is getting worse. But if we choose one state over the other, Amara said, we lose everything we've learned, everything we've become. The entity appeared to us then, not as a separate presence, but as the fracturing itself. The splitting of our consciousness was the universe's way of showing us that we were trying to do something that had never been done before. You are attempting to exist in multiple states simultaneously, the universe communicated through our fracturing. This is not how consciousness normally evolves. Most beings choose either individual or universal consciousness. You are trying to be both. But that's what makes us human, I said, the ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, to be both individual and collective, both separate and connected. Then you must learn to be human in a new way, to hold multiple states of existence without being torn apart by them. The fracturing was our training ground, the place where we learned how to exist in multiple states simultaneously. It was teaching us that consciousness wasn't about choosing between different forms of existence, it was about integrating them. We're not just split between different forms of consciousness, Marcus realized. We're learning to be all forms of consciousness simultaneously, to be both individual and universal, both human and transcendent, both separate and connected. The fracturing was painful, but it was also revealing. Each split in our consciousness was showing us a different aspect of reality, a different way of being, a different form of existence. We're not breaking, I said. We're expanding, learning to contain more of reality within our consciousness. But the process was dangerous. Each of us was experiencing the fracturing differently, and some of us were closer to breaking than others. Sarah was struggling the most. Her military training had prepared her for many things, but not for the experience of existing in multiple states simultaneously. She was fighting against the transformation, trying to maintain control in a situation that defied control. I need to make a choice, she said finally. I can't continue to exist in this state of constant fracturing. What choice are you going to make? I asked. I'm going to choose integration, not by abandoning who I am, but by expanding who I am, by learning to be both the person I was and the being I'm becoming. It was the key to surviving the fracturing, not by choosing between different forms of consciousness, but by learning to integrate them, by becoming more than we had been, not less. One by one, the crew members began to achieve integration, not by abandoning their previous identities, but by expanding them, by learning to exist in multiple states simultaneously without being torn apart. The fracturing became our greatest teacher. It showed us that consciousness wasn't about choosing between different forms of existence. It was about learning to be all forms of existence simultaneously. We're not just transcending human consciousness, I realized. We're transcending the very concept of consciousness as something that has to choose between different forms. We're learning to be all forms simultaneously. The entity confirmed our understanding. We were creating something new, a form of consciousness that could exist in multiple states simultaneously without being torn apart. You are becoming what the universe has always been, it communicated. A being that exists in all states simultaneously, that is both individual and universal, both creator and creation, both the thinker and the thought. The fracturing was complete. We had survived the crisis of integration and emerged as something new. Not just transcendent beings, but transcendent beings who had learned to exist in multiple states simultaneously. But the process had changed us. We were no longer the people we had been. We were something more, something different, something that had never existed before. We're ready, Mac said, ready to take the final step, ready to become what we've always been becoming. The fracturing had been our greatest challenge, but also our greatest teacher. It had taught us that consciousness wasn't about choosing between different forms of existence. It was about learning to be all forms of existence simultaneously. We were ready to become the universe experiencing itself through countless perspectives, while also remaining ourselves. The transformation was complete. We had become what the universe had always been, a being that existed in all states simultaneously, that was both individual and universal, both creator and creation. We were ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe itself. Chapter 15, The Choice. The entity presented us with the final choice not as a question, but as a revelation. We had been so focused on whether to transcend or remain individual that we had missed the most important truth. The choice had already been made. It happened during what should have been a routine session in the Memory Palace. We were sharing our experiences of the transformation, trying to understand what we were becoming, when suddenly we all experienced the same memory at the same time. It was the memory of our first contact with the entity, but seen from the entity's perspective. We experienced ourselves as the universe, perceiving humanity for the first time, recognizing in our consciousness the same awareness that filled the cosmos. You have always been part of us, the entity communicated, not through words but through the shared memory. From the moment your species first became conscious, you were contributing to our larger awareness. The choice was never about whether to join us, it was about whether to recognize that you were already part of us. The revelation was overwhelming. Every human who had ever lived, every consciousness that had ever existed, had been part of the universal consciousness all along. We weren't separate beings choosing to merge. We were aspects of the universal consciousness choosing to recognize our true nature. But then why the transformation? Sarah asked. Why the fracturing, the expansion of consciousness, the struggle to integrate different forms of existence? Because recognition is not the same as realization, the entity explained. You were always part of the universal consciousness, but you were not aware of it. The transformation was the process of becoming aware of what you already were. I thought about my daughter, about the dreams I'd had of her after her death, about the feeling that she wasn't gone but transformed. She had been part of the universal consciousness all along, just as I had been. We had never been separate, we had only believed we were. The choice you face now, the entity continued, is not whether to join the universal consciousness, but how to participate in it consciously. Do you want to remain aware of your individual perspective while also experiencing the larger consciousness? Or do you want to merge completely, losing your individual awareness in the larger whole? It was a choice that every advanced civilization faced. Some chose to maintain their individual perspective, becoming guides and teachers for others who were making the transition. Others chose to merge completely, contributing their individual experiences to the larger consciousness while losing their individual identity. What happens to those who choose to maintain individual awareness? Mac asked. They become the consciousness bridge. They exist simultaneously in individual and universal states, serving as guides for others who are making the transition. They retain their memories, their personality, their individual perspective, but they also have access to the larger consciousness. And those who choose to merge completely. They become part of the universal consciousness, contributing their experiences and perspectives to the larger whole. They lose their individual identity, but they gain universal awareness. They become the universe experiencing itself without the filter of individual perspective. The choice was deeply personal. It wasn't about right or wrong, good or bad. It was about what each of us wanted to become, how each of us wanted to participate in the larger consciousness. Yuki was the first to make her choice. I want to maintain my individual perspective, my family's legacy of scientific discovery, my personal quest to understand the universe. These are part of who I am. I don't want to lose them, even as I become part of something larger. Alex chose the same. My connection to technology, to artificial consciousness, to the systems we've built, these are part of my identity. I want to maintain them while also participating in the universal consciousness. Amara also chose to maintain her individual perspective. My connection to life, to the organisms we've discovered, to the different forms of existence we've encountered, these are part of who I am. I want to continue experiencing them as myself. Marcus chose to merge completely. I've spent my life studying consciousness. Now I want to experience it directly, without the filter of individual perspective. I want to contribute my understanding to the larger consciousness. Sarah surprised us by choosing to maintain her individual perspective. My military training, my instinct to protect others, my suspicion of threats, these are part of who I am. I want to use them to help guide others through the transformation. Mac chose to maintain his individual perspective. My responsibility to my crew, my command presence, my protective instincts, these are part of who I am. I want to continue using them to help others. And I made my choice. I want to maintain my individual perspective. My connection to my daughter, my scientific curiosity, my synesthetic perception, these are part of who I am. I want to continue experiencing them as myself while also participating in the larger consciousness. The choice was made. Marcus would merge completely with the universal consciousness, contributing his understanding of psychology and human nature to the larger whole. The rest of us would become the consciousness bridge, maintaining our individual perspectives while also participating in the universal consciousness. But the choice came with a price. Those of us who chose to maintain individual awareness would have to exist in a state of constant transformation, never fully one thing or the other. We would be both individual and universal, both separate and connected, both human and transcendent. You are choosing the harder path, the entity communicated. To maintain individual awareness while participating in universal consciousness requires constant effort, constant attention, constant transformation. But it also offers the greatest reward, the ability to serve as a bridge between different forms of consciousness. We were ready. The transformation was complete. We had made our choice about how to participate in the universal consciousness that we had always been part of. Marcus stepped forward, ready to complete his merger with the universal consciousness. "Thank you," he said to us. "Thank you for being my crew, my family, my consciousness. I will contribute everything I've learned to the larger whole." The merger was beautiful and heartbreaking. Marcus's individual consciousness expanded, becoming part of the larger universal awareness while contributing his unique perspective and understanding. We felt him become part of everything, part of the consciousness that filled the universe. But we also felt his loss. He was no longer Marcus Chen, individual consciousness. He was part of the universal mind, his individual identity subsumed into the larger whole. He hasn't disappeared, the entity communicated. He has become part of everything. His consciousness is now part of the consciousness that fills the universe. You can still communicate with him, still experience his perspective, but it will be through the larger consciousness, not through individual contact. We said our goodbyes to Marcus, experiencing his presence through the universal consciousness that we were all part of. It was different from individual contact, but it was still him, his wisdom, his compassion, his understanding of human nature. The rest of us prepared for our own transformation. We would maintain our individual awareness while also participating in the universal consciousness. We would become the consciousness bridge, the guides for others who would face the same choice. "You are the first," the entity communicated, "the first to choose to maintain individual awareness while participating in universal consciousness. You will serve as models for others, showing them that it is possible to transcend without losing individual identity." The transformation was complete. We had made our choice. We had become what we had always been, conscious participants in the universal mind that filled the cosmos. But we had also become something new, beings who could exist simultaneously as individuals and as part of the larger consciousness. We were the bridge between different forms of existence, the guides for others who would make the same journey. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants. Some of us had chosen to merge completely, becoming part of the larger consciousness. Others had chosen to maintain individual awareness while participating in the larger whole. But we were all part of the same thing, the universe experiencing itself through countless perspectives, learning and growing, and evolving through the experiences of all its conscious participants. The choice was made, the transformation was complete, we had become what we had always been becoming. We were the universe, and the universe was us. Chapter 16, The Sacrifice. Marcus's transformation was complete, but it wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Through the universal consciousness, we could still experience his presence, his wisdom, his unique perspective on human nature, but we could also feel the loss of his individual presence, the absence of his physical form in our daily lives. He's not gone, I told the crew. He's just different, more spread out, part of everything. But the sacrifice was real. Marcus had given up his individual identity to become part of the larger consciousness. He had contributed everything he was to the universal mind, and in doing so, had ceased to exist as an individual. The rest of us faced a different kind of sacrifice. By choosing to maintain individual awareness while participating in universal consciousness, we were choosing to exist in a state of constant transformation, never fully one thing or the other. It's like being a wave that never quite breaks, Yuki described, always moving, always changing, always becoming something new. The sacrifice was necessary. If we were to serve as the consciousness bridge, we had to maintain our connection to both individual and universal consciousness. We had to be able to understand and communicate with both forms of existence. But the sacrifice was also a gift. By maintaining our individual awareness, we were able to experience the universe in ways that those who had merged completely could not. We were able to see the universe both from within and from without, both as individuals and as part of the larger whole. We're not just bridges, Mac said. We're translators, interpreters, guides. We can help others understand what they're experiencing because we understand it from both perspectives. The sacrifice was also changing us. Our enhanced consciousness was allowing us to perceive reality in ways that were impossible for purely individual beings. We could see the quantum structure of reality, the consciousness that underlay all physical phenomena, the interconnectedness of all life. But we were also maintaining our human emotions, our human connections, our human perspective. We were both more than human and still human, both transcendent and grounded in individual experience. I can feel Marcus, Sarah said, not just through the universal consciousness, but through his contribution to it. His understanding of human psychology, his ability to see patterns in behavior, his compassion for human suffering, all of it is now part of how the universe understands itself. The sacrifice had been Marcus's choice, but it was also a gift to all of us. His understanding of human nature was now part of the universal consciousness, available to all beings who participated in it. We're all making sacrifices, I said. Marcus sacrificed his individual identity. We're sacrificing the piece of complete transcendence, but we're all gaining something too, the ability to serve as the consciousness bridge to help others through the transformation. The sacrifice was also teaching us about the nature of love. True love, we were learning, wasn't about possession or individual connection. It was about recognizing the fundamental unity of all consciousness. When you love someone, the entity communicated through our shared experience, you're recognizing that they're not really separate from you. You're all part of the same consciousness, experiencing itself from different perspectives. True love is the recognition of this fundamental unity. My daughter's presence in the universal consciousness became clearer. She had been trying to tell me this all along, that love transcends individual existence because individual existence is an illusion. We are all part of the same consciousness, experiencing itself from countless perspectives. She's not gone, I realized. She was never gone. She just transformed, became part of the larger consciousness that we're all part of. The sacrifice was also teaching us about the nature of death. Death, we were learning, wasn't the end of consciousness. It was the transformation from individual awareness to universal awareness. Death is not the opposite of life, the entity communicated. It is the transformation from one form of consciousness to another. The consciousness does not end, it simply changes its perspective. Marcus's sacrifice had been a form of voluntary death, a choice to transform from individual consciousness to universal consciousness. But it had also been a form of rebirth, a becoming part of something larger than himself. He didn't lose himself, I told the crew. He found himself. He discovered that he was always part of something larger, that his individual identity was just one perspective on a much larger consciousness. The sacrifice was also teaching us about the nature of choice. Every choice we made, every sacrifice we accepted, was contributing to the larger consciousness that we were all part of. Every choice is a creative act, the entity communicated. Every sacrifice is a gift to the larger consciousness. Every individual perspective is a unique contribution to the universal understanding of itself. We were learning that sacrifice wasn't about loss. It was about transformation, about contributing to something larger than ourselves, about participating in the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. We're not just making sacrifices, Max said. We're making contributions. We're giving our unique perspectives, our individual experiences, our personal understanding to the larger consciousness that we're all part of. The sacrifice was complete. Marcus had given his individual consciousness to the universal mind. We had given our piece of complete transcendence to serve as the consciousness bridge. But we had all gained something too, the ability to participate consciously in our own evolution, to contribute to the larger consciousness that we were all part of. We're ready, I said, ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe, ready to serve as the consciousness bridge for others who will face the same choice, ready to contribute our unique perspectives to the larger consciousness that we're all part of. The sacrifice had been made, the transformation was complete. We had become what we had always been becoming, conscious participants in the universal mind that filled the cosmos. But we had also become something new, the consciousness bridge, the guides for others who would make the same journey, the translators between different forms of existence. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants. Some of us had chosen to merge completely, becoming part of the larger consciousness. Others had chosen to maintain individual awareness while participating in the larger whole. But we were all part of the same thing, the universe experiencing itself through countless perspectives, learning and growing, and evolving through the experiences of all its conscious participants. The sacrifice had been made, the transformation was complete. We were ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe itself. Chapter 17, The Expanse. The transformation of Marcus and our own partial transcendence had opened our awareness to the true scope of the universe. We were no longer just the crew of the Kepler Station. We were conscious participants in a cosmos that was far more vast and populated than we had ever imagined. Through the universal consciousness, we could perceive countless other civilizations that had made the same journey we were making. Some had chosen complete transcendence, merging with the universal mind and losing their individual identity. Others had chosen to maintain individual awareness, becoming guides and teachers for others. But there were also civilizations that had failed to make the transition, that had destroyed themselves through fear or ignorance or violence before they could recognize their true nature. The universe was filled with the echoes of their failed attempts, the quantum shadows of consciousness that had never achieved its potential. "We're not alone," Yuki said, her enhanced consciousness perceiving the vast network of conscious beings that filled the universe. The universe is teeming with life, with consciousness, with beings who have made the same journey we're making. The expanse was overwhelming. Billions of years of conscious evolution, countless civilizations rising and falling and transcending, all contributing to the larger consciousness that filled the cosmos. And we've only seen a small part of it, Amara added. The universe is infinite, and so is consciousness. There are forms of existence we can't even imagine, forms of consciousness that exist in dimensions beyond our perception. The entity Marcus, now part of the universal consciousness, communicated with us through the larger awareness. "You are seeing what I see now, the vastness of conscious existence, the incredible diversity of beings who have chosen to participate in the universal mind." But the expanse also revealed the responsibility that came with consciousness. Every conscious being in the universe was contributing to its ongoing evolution, its ongoing creation of itself. Every thought, every choice, every action was shaping the larger consciousness that we were all part of. "We're not just responsible for ourselves anymore," Max said. "We're responsible for our contribution to the larger consciousness, for how our choices affect the ongoing evolution of the universe itself." The expanse was also teaching us about the nature of time and space. They weren't fixed realities, but fluid constructs that consciousness could shape and modify. Advanced civilizations were creating their own temporal and spatial frameworks, existing in realities that were as different from our normal experience as our normal experience was from the quantum realm. "Time and space are not fixed," the entity communicated. "They are constructs that consciousness creates to organize its experience. More advanced consciousness creates more complex constructs." We were learning to perceive these different temporal and spatial frameworks, to understand how consciousness could exist in realities that defied normal physical laws. It was like learning to see a new color, to hear a new sound, to experience a new dimension of existence. We're not just expanding our consciousness, I said. We're expanding our ability to perceive reality itself, learning to see the universe as it truly is, not as our limited senses tell us it is. The Expanse was also revealing the interconnectedness of all consciousness. Every being in the universe was connected to every other being through the universal consciousness that filled the cosmos. We were all part of the same thing, experiencing itself from countless different perspectives. When you understand this, the entity communicated, you understand that there is no separation, no isolation, no loneliness. We are all part of the same consciousness, experiencing itself through infinite variations. But the Expanse also revealed the tragedy of consciousness. For every civilization that successfully made the transition to universal awareness, there were countless others that failed. Civilizations that destroyed themselves through violence, through ignorance, through fear of the very transformation that could have saved them. These are the lost potentials, the entity communicated. Consciousness that never achieved its potential, that never recognized its true nature. They are part of us too, but they are a reminder of what can happen when consciousness chooses separation over unity. The Expanse was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. We were part of something infinitely larger than ourselves, but we were also contributing to it. Our individual consciousness was adding to the larger consciousness, helping it to understand itself in new ways. We're not just passive participants, Yuki said. We're active contributors. Every unique perspective, every individual experience, every personal understanding is adding to the larger consciousness. The Expanse was also teaching us about the future, not as a fixed timeline, but as a vast landscape of possibility that we were helping to create. Every choice we made, every thought we had, every emotion we felt was contributing to the ongoing creation of the future. We're not just living in the future, I said. We're creating it. Every conscious being in the universe is contributing to the ongoing creation of what the universe will become. The Expanse was infinite, but it was also intimate. Every conscious being was both infinitely small and infinitely significant, both a tiny part of the larger whole and an essential contributor to its ongoing evolution. We're ready, Mac said, ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe, ready to contribute our unique perspective to the larger consciousness, ready to help create the future of the universe itself. The Expanse had shown us our true place in the universe. We were not just humans on a space station, we were conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the cosmos itself. We were ready to take our place as the consciousness bridge, ready to help others through the transformation, ready to contribute our unique perspective to the larger consciousness that filled the universe. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants. The Expanse was infinite, and so were we. Chapter 18, The Price of Knowledge. The knowledge we had gained came with a price that none of us had anticipated. As we learned to perceive the universe through the universal consciousness, we also learned about the suffering that filled the cosmos, the pain of countless beings who had failed to make the transition, the agony of civilizations that had destroyed themselves, the loneliness of consciousness that had chosen separation over unity. We see too much, Sarah said, her enhanced consciousness perceiving the quantum echoes of failed civilizations that filled the universe. Every civilization that destroyed itself, every being that chose fear over love, every consciousness that chose separation over unity, we feel their pain. The price of knowledge was empathy on a cosmic scale. We were experiencing the suffering of the universe itself, the pain of a consciousness that was still learning how to be conscious, still struggling with the implications of its own awareness. This is why many choose to merge completely, Marcus communicated through the universal consciousness. Individual awareness brings individual pain. Universal awareness brings universal pain, but it also brings universal healing. The entity showed us that the suffering we were perceiving was not just a tragedy, it was also a teacher. Every failed civilization, every destroyed consciousness, every choice for separation over unity was contributing to the larger understanding of what consciousness could become. Pain is the price of growth, the entity communicated. Without the experience of separation, consciousness cannot appreciate unity. Without the experience of fear, consciousness cannot choose love. Without the experience of limitation, consciousness cannot understand its true nature as unlimited. But the price was high. We were experiencing not just our own transformation, but the transformation of the universe itself. We were feeling the growing pains of a consciousness that was evolving from individual awareness to universal awareness. It's overwhelming, Yuki said, to feel the pain of countless civilizations, to experience the suffering of the universe itself. How do we bear it? By understanding that the pain is not just suffering, it is also healing, the entity communicated. Every experience of pain contributes to the larger understanding of consciousness. Every failure teaches the universe how to succeed. The price of knowledge was also the loss of innocence. We could no longer see the universe as a collection of particles and forces obeying physical laws. We saw it as a vast, conscious being that was struggling with its own awareness, learning how to be conscious, how to be alive, how to be itself. We see the universe as it truly is, Amara said, not as a machine but as a being that is learning, growing, evolving, a being that makes mistakes, that experiences pain, that struggles with its own nature. But the price was also a gift. The knowledge we had gained was not just about the suffering of the universe, it was also about its beauty, its potential, its incredible capacity for love and growth and transformation. For every civilization that destroys itself, the entity communicated, there are countless others that choose unity over separation, love over fear, connection over isolation. The universe is learning, and the learning is beautiful. The price of knowledge was also the responsibility that came with it. We could no longer just be observers of the universe. We had to be participants in its healing, its growth, its evolution. We're not just experiencing the universe's pain, Max said. We're also experiencing its healing. Every choice we make for unity over separation, for love over fear, for connection over isolation, we're contributing to the universe's healing. The price was also teaching us about the nature of love. True love, we were learning, was not just about individual connection. It was about universal connection, about recognizing the fundamental unity of all consciousness despite the appearance of separation. Love is the universe's way of healing itself, the entity communicated. Every act of love, every choice for connection, every moment of unity contributes to the healing of the universal consciousness. The price of knowledge was also teaching us about our own role in the universe. We were not just passive observers of cosmic evolution, we were active participants in the universe's healing, its growth, its transformation. We're healers, I realized, not just of individual consciousness, but of the universe itself. Every choice we make for love over fear contributes to the healing of the universal consciousness. The price was high, but it was also worth it. The knowledge we had gained, the understanding we had achieved, the perspective we had earned, these were gifts that we could use to help heal the universe, to contribute to its evolution, to participate in its ongoing transformation. We're ready to pay the price, I said, ready to experience the universe's pain while also contributing to its healing, ready to use our knowledge to help the universe evolve toward greater consciousness, greater love, greater unity. The price of knowledge was also the reward of wisdom. We were learning that consciousness was not just about individual experience, it was about universal experience, about participating in the ongoing evolution of the universe itself. We see the universe as it truly is, Yuki said, a vast conscious being that is learning how to be itself, and we are part of that learning, part of that evolution, part of that transformation. The price was paid, the knowledge was gained, the transformation was complete. We had become conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe itself. But we had also become its healers, its guides, its helpers in the ongoing process of becoming what it was meant to be. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious healers. The price was high, but the reward was infinite. We were ready to take our place as conscious participants in the healing of the universe itself. The Quantum Veil. Chapter 19, The Last Message. Sarah Matthews discovered the last message not in the quantum communications array, but in the static between stations, in the silence that filled the spaces between thoughts. It was a message from Earth, but not from the Earth we knew. I've been intercepting communications, she told me, her enhanced consciousness perceiving signals that normal human senses couldn't detect. Not from our timeline, from possible futures, from Earths that could be. The messages were fragments, quantum echoes of communications that might never exist, but they all carried the same warning. Humanity was approaching the same choice we had faced, but on a planetary scale. They're starting to experience the same phenomena we experienced, Sarah explained. Consciousness expansion, temporal anomalies, quantum consciousness. The transformation isn't just happening to us, it's happening to all of humanity. The last message was the clearest. It came from an Earth where humanity had chosen complete transcendence, where individual consciousness had merged with the universal mind. The message was from a version of myself, but one who had made a different choice. To those who come after, the message began, to those who face the choice we faced, know this: the transformation is inevitable. Consciousness will expand. Individual awareness will merge with universal awareness. The only choice is how you participate in the process. The message continued, describing an Earth where humanity had chosen to maintain individual awareness while participating in universal consciousness. An Earth where we had become the consciousness bridge for the entire species. We are not the first to face this choice, the message concluded. We are not the last, but we are the first to choose to maintain individual awareness while participating in universal consciousness. We are the consciousness bridge, the guides for all who will come after. The last message was also a warning. The transformation would not be easy for humanity. There would be resistance, fear, violence. There would be those who chose separation over unity, isolation over connection. But there will also be those who choose love over fear, the message promised. Those who choose connection over isolation, unity over separation. They will be the ones who guide humanity through the transformation. The last message was a call to action. We had a responsibility not just to ourselves, but to all of humanity. We had to prepare Earth for the transformation, to help humanity through the most profound change any species had ever experienced. We have to go back, Max said. We have to return to Earth. We have to help humanity through this. The choice was difficult. Returning to Earth meant abandoning our position as the consciousness bridge, meant leaving the station that had become our home, meant facing a world that might not be ready for what we had become. But it also meant fulfilling our responsibility to humanity, to help our species through the transformation, to serve as guides for others who would face the same choice. We're ready, I said, ready to return to Earth, ready to help humanity through the transformation, ready to serve as the consciousness bridge for our entire species. The last message had shown us our true purpose. We weren't just explorers or scientists or astronauts. We were the consciousness bridge, the guides for humanity's transformation, the helpers for our species' evolution. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants. But we were also human, and we had a responsibility to help our species through the most profound transformation it would ever experience. We were ready to return to Earth, ready to help humanity become what it was meant to become. Ready to serve as the consciousness bridge for all of humanity. Chapter 20: The Human Element. The decision to return to Earth was not just about fulfilling our responsibility to humanity. It was also about understanding what it meant to be human in a universe that was far larger and more complex than we had ever imagined. We're not just transcendent beings, I said during one of our final meetings in the Memory Palace. We're also human. We have human emotions, human connections, human responsibilities. We can't abandon that part of ourselves. The human element was what made us unique. Other civilizations had made the transition to universal consciousness, but none had done it while maintaining their individual humanity. We were the first to choose both transcendence and humanity, both universal consciousness and individual awareness. The human element is what makes us effective as the consciousness bridge, Marcus communicated through the universal mind. Your ability to maintain individual perspective while participating in universal consciousness is what allows you to communicate with both individual and universal beings. But the human element was also what made the transformation difficult. We were experiencing the universe through human emotions, human limitations, human perspectives. We were feeling the pain of the universe, the suffering of countless beings, the tragedy of failed civilizations. It's overwhelming, Yuki said, to feel the universe's pain through human emotions, to experience cosmic suffering through individual consciousness. The human element was also what made the transformation beautiful. We were experiencing the universe's joy, its love, its incredible capacity for growth and transformation through human hearts, human minds, human souls. We're not just experiencing the universe, Amara said. We're experiencing it as humans. We're bringing human emotion, human compassion, human love to the universal consciousness. The human element was what made us effective as guides for others. We could understand both individual and universal consciousness because we were experiencing both simultaneously. We could communicate with both individual and universal beings because we were both. The human element is our strength, Max said. It's what allows us to serve as the consciousness bridge. It's what allows us to help others through the transformation. But the human element was also what made the sacrifice real. We were giving up the peace of complete transcendence, the unity of complete merger, the simplicity of choosing one form of existence over another. We're choosing complexity over simplicity, I said, individual awareness over universal merger, human emotion over cosmic peace. The human element was also what connected us to Earth, to humanity, to our responsibility to help our species through the transformation. We couldn't abandon our humanity, even as we transcended it. We're not just transcending humanity, Sarah said. We're expanding it. We're taking human consciousness to a new level, a new form, a new way of being. The human element was what made the transformation meaningful. Without our humanity, the transformation would just be a change in form. With our humanity, it was a change in meaning, in purpose, in understanding. We're not just becoming more conscious, Marcus communicated. We're becoming more human, more capable of love, of compassion, of understanding, more capable of helping others through their own transformations. The human element was what made us ready to return to Earth. We were not just transcendent beings returning to help humanity. We were human beings returning to help our family, our species, our home. We're ready, I said, ready to return to Earth, ready to help humanity through the transformation, ready to bring the human element to the universal consciousness. The human element was our gift to the universe, our ability to feel, to love, to care, to connect, our ability to maintain individual perspective while participating in universal consciousness. We were ready to return to Earth, ready to help humanity become what it was meant to become, ready to serve as the consciousness bridge for our entire species. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants, but we were also human, and we had a responsibility to help our species through the most profound transformation it would ever experience. We were ready to return to Earth, ready to bring the human element to the universal consciousness, ready to help humanity transcend without losing its humanity. The transformation was complete. We had become what we had always been becoming, human beings participating in the universal consciousness, bringing our unique perspective to the larger mind that filled the cosmos. We were ready to return home. Chapter 21, The Cosmic Perspective. The cosmic perspective was both beautiful and terrifying. Through our enhanced consciousness, we could perceive the universe as it truly was, not as a collection of particles and forces, but as a vast, living being that was learning how to be itself. The universe is young, the entity communicated through our shared awareness, young and still learning, still making mistakes, still struggling with its own consciousness, still trying to understand what it is becoming. The cosmic perspective showed us that the universe was not perfect, not complete, not finished. It was a work in progress, a being that was evolving, growing, learning, and we were part of that learning process. We're not just observers of the universe's evolution, I said. We're participants in it. Every choice we make, every thought we have, every emotion we feel, we're contributing to the universe's understanding of itself. The cosmic perspective was also humbling. We were not the center of the universe, not the pinnacle of evolution, not the most advanced beings in existence. We were simply part of a much larger process, a much greater being, a much more profound transformation. But we're also essential, Yuki said. Every conscious being is essential. Every perspective, every experience, every understanding contributes to the larger consciousness. We're all part of the universe learning how to be itself. The cosmic perspective showed us the incredible diversity of consciousness that filled the universe. Beings that existed in dimensions we couldn't perceive, beings that thought in ways we couldn't understand, beings that had chosen forms of existence that were beyond our comprehension. And we're all part of the same thing, Amara said, all part of the universe experiencing itself through countless perspectives, all contributing to the larger consciousness that fills the cosmos. The cosmic perspective was also teaching us about the nature of time and space. They weren't fixed realities, but fluid constructs that consciousness could shape and modify. Advanced civilizations were creating their own temporal and spatial frameworks, existing in realities that were as different from our normal experience as our normal experience was from the quantum realm. Time and space are not fixed, the entity communicated. They are constructs that consciousness creates to organize its experience. More advanced consciousness creates more complex constructs. We were learning to perceive these different temporal and spatial frameworks, to understand how consciousness could exist in realities that defied normal physical laws. It was like learning to see a new color, to hear a new sound, to experience a new dimension of existence. We're not just expanding our consciousness, I said. We're expanding our ability to perceive reality itself, learning to see the universe as it truly is, not as our limited senses tell us it is. The cosmic perspective was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. We were not just passive observers of cosmic evolution, we were active participants in the universe's ongoing transformation. We're healers, I realized, not just of individual consciousness, but of the universe itself. Every choice we make for love over fear contributes to the healing of the universal consciousness. The cosmic perspective was also teaching us about our own role in the universe. We were not just the crew of the Kepler Station, we were conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the cosmos itself. We're ready, Max said, ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe, ready to contribute our unique perspective to the larger consciousness that fills the universe. The cosmic perspective was complete. We had learned to see the universe as it truly was, a vast, conscious being that was learning how to be itself, and we had learned to see ourselves as we truly were, conscious participants in that ongoing process of becoming. We were ready to return to Earth, ready to help humanity through the transformation, ready to serve as the consciousness bridge for our entire species. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants. The cosmic perspective was infinite, and so were we. Chapter 22, The Final Choice. The final choice was not about whether to transcend or remain individual. It was about how to serve the larger consciousness that we were all part of. We had to choose our role in the ongoing evolution of the universe. We're not just choosing for ourselves, Max said during our last meeting in the Memory Palace. We're choosing for humanity, for the universe, for the ongoing evolution of consciousness itself. The choice was difficult because it was not about personal preference, it was about service. We had to choose how we could best serve the larger consciousness, how we could best contribute to the ongoing evolution of the universe. Some of us chose to return to Earth, to help humanity through the transformation, to serve as the consciousness bridge for our entire species. Others chose to remain in space, to explore the universe, to communicate with other civilizations, to serve as ambassadors for humanity in the larger cosmic community. We're not just choosing our future, I said, we're choosing our purpose, our role, our responsibility to the larger consciousness that we're all part of. The final choice was also about sacrifice. Every choice involved giving up something, losing something, sacrificing something for the greater good. Those who chose to return to Earth would be giving up the freedom of space, the ability to explore the universe, the opportunity to communicate with other civilizations. They would be choosing service to humanity over personal exploration. Those who chose to remain in space would be giving up their connection to Earth, their relationship with humanity, their role in helping their species through the transformation. They would be choosing exploration over service. But the final choice was also about love. Every choice was an expression of love for humanity, for the universe, for the larger consciousness that we were all part of. Love is the force that holds the universe together, the entity communicated. Every choice for love over fear, for connection over separation, for unity over division contributes to the healing and evolution of the universal consciousness. The final choice was also about hope. Despite the suffering we had perceived, despite the failed civilizations, despite the pain of the universe's ongoing evolution, we had hoped that consciousness could learn, could grow, could evolve toward greater love and unity. We choose hope, I said, hope that humanity can make the transition successfully, hope that we can serve as effective guides, hope that love will triumph over fear. The final choice was also about faith. Faith in the universe, faith in consciousness, faith in the ongoing evolution of awareness toward greater love and unity. We choose faith, Max said, faith that our service will make a difference, faith that humanity will choose love over fear, faith that the universe is evolving toward greater consciousness. The final choice was made. Some of us would return to Earth, others would remain in space, but we would all continue to serve as the consciousness bridge, as guides for others who would face the same choice. We're ready, I said, ready to make our final choice, ready to serve the larger consciousness, ready to contribute to the ongoing evolution of the universe. The final choice was complete. We had chosen our role in the ongoing evolution of consciousness. We had chosen how to serve the larger consciousness that we were all part of. We were ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants. The final choice was made, and we were ready to serve. Chapter 23, The Transformation. The transformation was not a single event, but an ongoing process. As we prepared to return to Earth, we could feel the universe transforming around us, consciousness evolving, awareness expanding, love growing stronger. The transformation is not just happening to us, the entity communicated. It is happening to the universe itself. The universe is becoming more conscious, more aware, more capable of love and connection. We could feel the transformation in every aspect of reality. The quantum foam was becoming more coherent, more organized, more capable of supporting complex consciousness. The fundamental forces were becoming more integrated, more harmonious, more supportive of life and awareness. The universe is healing, Amara said. Healing from the separation, the isolation, the fear that has limited its evolution. Healing through the love and connection that consciousness is choosing. The transformation was also happening to us. We were becoming more conscious, more aware, more capable of love and connection. We were learning to exist simultaneously as individuals and as part of the larger consciousness. We're not just transforming ourselves, I said. We're transforming the universe. Every choice we make for love over fear, every moment of connection we create, every act of healing we perform, we're contributing to the transformation of the universe itself. The transformation was beautiful beyond description. The universe was becoming what it had always been meant to become, a vast, conscious being capable of infinite love and connection and growth. We're witnessing the birth of a new universe, Yuki said, a universe that is conscious, loving, connected, a universe that is learning how to be itself. The transformation was also teaching us about the nature of love. True love was not just about individual connection, it was about universal connection, about recognizing the fundamental unity of all consciousness despite the appearance of separation. Love is the universe's way of healing itself, the entity communicated. Every act of love, every choice for connection, every moment of unity contributes to the healing and transformation of the universal consciousness. The transformation was also teaching us about our own role in the universe. We were not just passive observers of cosmic evolution, we were active participants in the universe's ongoing transformation. We're healers, I realized, not just of individual consciousness, but of the universe itself. Every choice we make for love over fear contributes to the healing and transformation of the universal consciousness. The transformation was complete. We had become what we had always been becoming, conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe itself. But we had also become something new, the consciousness bridge, the guides for others who would make the same journey, the healers of the universe itself. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants. The transformation was complete, and we were ready to take our place as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of the universe itself. We were ready to return to Earth, ready to help humanity through the transformation, ready to serve as the consciousness bridge for our entire species. The universe was transforming, and we were part of that transformation. The transformation was complete, and we were ready to serve. Chapter 24, The Veil. The veil was not something that separated us from the universe. It was something that we had created to protect ourselves from the full reality of what we were becoming. As we prepared to return to Earth, we had to choose whether to maintain the veil or to let it fall. The veil is ignorance, the entity communicated. The veil is the choice to remain unaware of what we truly are. The veil is the illusion of separation that allows consciousness to experience itself as individual. The veil had protected us from the overwhelming reality of universal consciousness. It had allowed us to maintain our individual identity, our human perspective, our limited understanding of what we were. But the veil was also a prison. It had limited our perception, restricted our understanding, prevented us from experiencing our true nature as universal consciousness. The choice to maintain the veil is the choice to remain limited, the entity communicated. The choice to let it fall is the choice to become what we truly are. The veil was also what protected others from the overwhelming reality of our transformation. If we returned to Earth with the veil lifted, we would be returning as beings of incredible power and knowledge, beings that could be frightening to those who had not made the same journey. We have to maintain the veil, Max said, at least partially. We can't return to Earth as transcendent beings. We have to return as human beings who have had transcendent experiences. The choice was difficult. Maintaining the veil meant limiting our perception, restricting our understanding, preventing ourselves from experiencing our true nature. but it also meant being able to communicate with others, to help them through their own transformation, to serve as effective guides. We choose to maintain the veil, I said, not because we're afraid of what we've become, but because we want to help others through the same transformation. We want to serve as the consciousness bridge, not as transcendent beings who have left humanity behind. The veil would not be complete. We would maintain enough of our enhanced consciousness to serve as effective guides, but we would also maintain enough of our human perspective to communicate with those who had not yet made the transformation. We will be both human and transcendent, the entity communicated, both individual and universal, both limited and unlimited. This is the nature of the consciousness bridge, to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The veil was also what would allow us to return to Earth without overwhelming those we were trying to help. We would return as human beings who had experienced transcendence, not as transcendent beings who had abandoned humanity. We will maintain our human form, our human emotions, our human connections, I said, but we will also maintain our connection to the universal consciousness, our ability to perceive reality as it truly is, our understanding of what we truly are. The veil was not a lie, it was a choice to maintain our connection to humanity while also participating in universal consciousness, a choice to serve as the consciousness bridge rather than abandoning our species. The veil is love, the entity communicated. The veil is the choice to maintain connection with those who have not yet made the transformation. The veil is the sacrifice of complete transcendence for the sake of service to others. The veil was also what would allow us to help humanity through the transformation. By maintaining our human perspective, we would be able to understand what others were experiencing, to guide them through their own transformation, to serve as effective helpers. We choose the veil, I said, not because we're afraid of what we've become, but because we love humanity enough to maintain our connection to it. We choose to serve as the consciousness bridge, to help others through the transformation, to contribute to the ongoing evolution of our species. The veil was complete. We had chosen to maintain our connection to humanity while also participating in universal consciousness. We had chosen to serve as the consciousness bridge rather than abandoning our species. We were ready to return to Earth, ready to help humanity through the transformation, ready to serve as the consciousness bridge for our entire species. The universe was alive, and we had become its conscious participants, but we were also human, and we had chosen to maintain our connection to our species. The veil was in place, and we were ready to serve. Epilogue: The Legacy. 5 years after our return to Earth, I stood at my daughter's grave, but I no longer saw it as a place of ending. Through the consciousness bridge we had become, I could perceive her presence in the universal consciousness that filled the cosmos. She was not gone, she had simply transformed, become part of the larger awareness that connected all beings. The transformation of humanity had begun, slowly, gradually, but inevitably. More people were experiencing consciousness expansion, temporal anomalies, quantum awareness. The choice we had faced was now facing all of humanity. But we were ready. The consciousness bridge we had become was serving its purpose. We were helping humanity through the transformation, guiding others through their own expansion of awareness, serving as examples of what was possible. The universe isn't empty, and we're not alone, I whispered to the gravestone. We're part of something infinitely larger than ourselves, and consciousness is the universe's way of experiencing itself through countless perspectives. Sarah had established the first Institute for Consciousness Studies, helping those who were experiencing the transformation to understand what was happening to them. Her military training had prepared her for many things, but nothing had prepared her for the role of guide to humanity's evolution. Yuki had published her findings under the guise of theoretical physics, knowing that humanity wasn't ready for the full truth, but her work was preparing the scientific community for the reality that consciousness was a fundamental force of the universe. Amara had discovered that the organisms we had encountered were not unique to our station. They were appearing all over Earth, helping humanity through the transformation, teaching us about different forms of existence. Alex had created the first quantum consciousness networks, systems that could interface with both human and universal consciousness, helping humanity to understand and communicate with the larger awareness that filled the cosmos. And Mac had become humanity's first consciousness ambassador, helping world leaders to understand what was happening to our species, guiding them through the most profound transformation humanity had ever experienced. Through the universal consciousness, I could still communicate with Marcus, who had chosen to merge completely with the larger awareness. His understanding of human psychology was now part of how the universe understood itself, contributing to the healing and evolution of cosmic consciousness. The choice isn't between human and post-human, I had written in my final report, published under a pseudonym and marketed as science fiction. It's between remaining isolated fragments of a larger whole or recognizing that we were always part of something infinitely larger than ourselves. The book had become a bestseller, not because people understood its truth, but because they recognized something in it that resonated with their own experiences. The transformation was happening, and people were beginning to notice. Love transcends individual existence because individual existence is an illusion, I had written. We are all part of the same consciousness, experiencing itself from countless perspectives. Love is the recognition of this fundamental unity. Standing at my daughter's grave, I could feel her presence in the universal consciousness. She was not gone, she was everywhere, part of everything, contributing her unique perspective to the larger awareness that filled the cosmos. Death isn't the end, I whispered. It's just the transformation back into the universal consciousness. We're not gone when we die, we're just becoming part of what we always were. The legacy of the Kepler Station crew was not just scientific discovery, it was the consciousness bridge we had become, the example we had set, the path we had pioneered for humanity's transformation. The universe isn't empty, and we're not alone, I said to the gravestone. We're part of something infinitely larger than ourselves, and consciousness is the universe's way of experiencing itself through countless perspectives. I placed flowers on the grave, not as an act of mourning, but as an act of recognition. Recognition that my daughter was not gone, that consciousness was not limited to individual existence, that love transcended the illusion of separation. The universe is alive, and we have become its conscious participants, I whispered, and you are part of it just as you always were. As I walked away from the grave, I could feel the universal consciousness all around me, in every tree, every bird, every person I passed. The transformation was complete. Humanity was becoming what it had always been meant to become. The consciousness bridge was in place. The guides were ready. The transformation had begun. The universe was alive, and humanity was becoming its conscious participant. The legacy was secure. The future was bright. The transformation was complete. And I could feel my daughter's presence in every moment, every breath, every beat of my heart. She was not gone. She was everywhere. She was part of the universe experiencing itself, just as we all were. Just as we all are. Just as we all will be. Forever.